Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 18th, 2011 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. As a reminder, there are agendas on both sides of the room, so anyone who would like to pick one up and follow along with our items tonight, we invite you to do so. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both on items we'll be voting on tonight as well as items that will be voted on at a future point in time. It is our custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so at this point in time I would ask everyone to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now I'd like to ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, where we address minutes from prior council meetings. We have 2 sets of minutes tonight, our budget meeting minutes from October 1st, 2011, and our council meeting minutes from October 11th, 2011. Are any changes or corrections from any members of the council with respect to either set of minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Those minutes will be accepted as presented. Thank you. And just like that, we're at item 4. This is the part of our agenda where we take public comments on matters of a general nature. These are items that are not necessarily appearing on our agenda tonight. There will be an opportunity to talk about matters that are on our agenda tonight. So if anyone has any comments or questions or insights of a general nature that would like to come up and address the council, we invite you to do so. Please come down to the microphone, tell us your name, your address, and we'd love to hear from you. Good evening, Mr. Falish.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Frank Falish, 820 Prairie, Downers Grove. Mayor Tully said the magic word, snow, in his article in the local Downers Grove restaurant listing, and it was also the last word. But some people feel that the snowplower should be licensed. But at least they should be required to follow the law and not dump snow on sidewalks as they are doing in many businesses like Omega and the Downers Grove Animal Hospital, to name 2 along Ogden Avenue. It is dangerous when the snow is piled up on the sidewalks because pedestrians must climb over the snow or try to navigate with the traffic on Ogden Avenue. Many of the businesses on Ogden Avenue follow the law and keep their sidewalks plowed. This problem has been going on for years, and it has been brought to the attention of the council many times, and we don't seem to be getting too much results. At least Downers Grove should ticket the offending businesses because there's an ordinance covering this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falish. Just to clarify, you were talking about private snow plowing, not our fine, outstanding Public Works Department. Thank you. Any other comments or questions of a general nature? Seeing none, there are no public hearings tonight, so we'll move right to item number 6, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Mayor Tully, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to the consent agenda? Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda has been approved unanimously. That brings us to item 7 on our agenda, which is our active agenda. These are items that we'll be voting on individually tonight, and there is one such item. Do I have a motion to approve an ordinance amending the sign ordinance? Well, that's a model of clarity, isn't it?
Mayor Tully, I move to adopt an ordinance amending certain sign ordinance provisions as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the council? All levity aside, obviously we workshopped this item before, so we went into great detail as to what it pertains to, and it's mostly cleaning up some scrivener's issues. Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience with respect to the motion to amend the sign ordinance? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the matter passes unanimously. That now brings us to item 8 on our agenda, which is our first reading, or what is sort of like our workshop. These are items that are being presented for discussion for the first time and will be voted on at a later point in time. So this is a little bit more in the informal part of the meeting where we invite discussion both on the dais as well as in the audience, although, of course, respecting protocol. So at this point, I will turn the meeting over to Village Manager Dave Fieldman to introduce each of the items. And I guess we'll begin, as it suggests, with item 8A.
We will. There are 4 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is item A, consideration of a motion to join the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference. This would be for a period between November 1st, 2011 and April 30th, 2012. This includes the payment of membership dues on a prorated basis, on a per-month basis, of $18,388 total for that 6-month period. You may recall that the village canceled its membership in this organization in July 2010. We had been members previously since 1977. There was a concern about the value of our membership at that time. Tonight, I'm pleased to introduce representatives from the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference who are here to provide information about the value of becoming members of this organization. So I'd like to call up to the podium the Executive Director, Mark Beloga, and Mayor Craig from their board.
Gentlemen, welcome to Downers Grove. We appreciate you coming here and presenting to us. I know firsthand that you've already had a full day of meetings with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus meeting this morning, so thank you for fitting this into your schedule and seeing us tonight.
Well, good evening, Mayor Tully. And yes, we did spend some time together this morning into the afternoon, and then we rushed back for a legislative meeting with DuPage Mayor and Managers. Then I had to run home because I forgot my phone to find my way here and discover where the Village Hall was. And my GPS took me to the Public Works building where they have some meetings with woodworkers, and I thought, gee, I might want to camp out here instead. Greetings to the council and to you, Mayor Tully.
Well, thank you for being here, Mayor. It's good to see you.
It's my pleasure. The item before us, 33 years member, probably a charter member with that length of time in DuPage Mayor and Managers. We're very proud of that organization. I'm currently the vice president of the organization, and representing DuPage County is an honor that's bestowed upon us. Last year, we took off on a new initiative with a lobbying piece. And most of us look at lobbyists, and my board looked at lobbying with kind of a jaundiced eye. They said, Mayor, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm directly involved here, so I'm a part of the solution. And the solution with our lobbying efforts, we found a good firm. We interviewed a number of them. But the whole component that's different for us is using the lobbyist as a coach, as someone that's going to provide us mentor for the county. And that's working out real well. I tend to call the mayors and those trustees and council members that involve themselves in DuPage Mayor and Managers as the engine. When we go down to Springfield, and I've taken a liberty of going down as often as I can, and I think last year I went down 5 or 6 times at key opportunities to visit with our legislators representing DuPage County, and then the executive group that come together, leaders in the House and the Senate. And having those opportunities and providing what a mayor can bring to the table and what those of us who are elected can bring to the table with the coaching and mentorship of a good lobbyist firm has really been, has added a lot of value for us and provided some real good direction with what we went through this last year with the threats on our LGDF. And so we're focused on the issues at hand. We spent a lot of time today looking ahead to the future and how we work with our lobbyists. This morning you were a part of witnessing how, and I have to give credit to DuPage County Mayor and Managers, of saying we've got to come to the forefront with our lobbyists, and we have to be on the same page. So you saw lobbyists from representing the different COGs and the city of Chicago. So we know in an environment with a state that's really struggling that we have to protect our local interests. And our local interests begin with the regional concept of DuPage Mayor and Managers and what that brings. Hanover Park, where I'm the mayor, we're also in Cook County. So I have a whole nother issues with Cook County and that body. But the Northwest Municipal League, we're also a member of that. And that component works really well for us and bring it together. And I'll let you know that those two councils of government, Northwest and DuPage, and I think DuPage really takes a lot of leadership due to the investment of its leaders, its municipal leaders. So I want to thank you for that introduction, and I know our Executive Director, Mark Pologa, has a few suggestions and thoughts too. Mark?
Thanks very much for inviting us here again tonight. I just want to let you know a couple of the things that have changed since I spoke last with the group, which was July of 2010. We've made a few reorganizational moves. We have downsized our staff in part so that we can continue. We've had 3 years so far of no dues increase, which these days has been very important to our membership. So we've downsized our staff and made some shifts a little bit in how we're staffing the organization. But more importantly, I want to give a couple examples of some of the things we've been involved in that we have provided to our membership over the last year. Mayor Craig did reference the Local Government Distributive Fund, which I think you probably all are aware was under attack more or less during the last legislative session or during this last spring legislative session. And while it certainly wasn't all DuPage mayors and managers doing, we did play very much a leadership role in helping to garner a consortium of municipal groups from around the region and working with IML as well, and in working with the legislators and legislative leaders to help keep LGDF in the hands of municipalities and not being used by the state to balance its own budget. One of the key roles we actually played in that was due to a conversation we were able to have with Senator Harmon, who is very high on the leadership in the Senate Democrat caucus. And we came to a point of realizing that what had been a very hard push on Local Government Distributive Fund, press conferences, editorials, and being as public as we can and really challenging the legislators to look closely at what would happen, the kind of negative results that could happen if all this money was taken away from municipalities. And Senator Harmon told us, we get that. You need to stop hitting us over the head and now find a way to work with us and have a solution. So we were actually the organization that talked to all the other municipal groups to say we need to shift our tactic here so that the legislators can, in good faith, make some moves toward the positive once they had started to listen to us. So it was, I think, a very helpful piece to the overall project. Again, there were a lot of folks, a lot of groups, and a lot of individuals who worked on that, including Downers Grove's individual lobbyist, who was very active on that issue as well. More recently, a couple of things that we've been involved in that our members have found very beneficial is with electric aggregation. Communities now, through statute, have the ability to aggregate the entire community's electric purchase for all the citizens and small businesses. And we've put together 2 forums. One's tomorrow night at our regular monthly business meeting, a forum that some of you have been to in the past, but also a special forum that we held last Wednesday to really get into. We took half a day to look at the details and the meat of how this works and what the policy considerations of a town are going to be, as well as distributing to all of our members an aggregation kit of documents, timelines, model ordinances and resolutions, so that a community looking into this will know what they're deciding on, first of all, and then be able to move forward, not starting from scratch, trying to figure out what this all means, but getting a real head start for that. So that was something that we've gotten very good feedback from our members that has been beneficial to them as they look to this, especially in the short timeline. People who want to do it short term need to get an item on the March ballot, which means by the end of this calendar year, pretty much you have to have gone through the village board, village commission process to make those approvals. And then the final example I'll talk about, because I know stormwater issues are very important in Downers Grove, and the DuPage County, as you probably know, is rewriting its stormwater ordinance comprehensively, really for several months now, I think over a year, have been looking at that. And so we have put together a group of our members, mostly technical, engineer, manager, community development staff, to look incredibly closely, and then we vet at a policy level the recommendations that come out of that group, and have played a very significant role in how the ordinance is being rewritten for the county, but also in terms of how the process has worked, how municipal input has been taken. In the very beginning, and I'm not trying to disparage DuPage County because they really tried to get input, but the process that they used was to set up a blog, and they hoped that mayors would come on and enter responses and entries into this blog, and then come back again and read other mayors' entries and talk about stormwater on a policy level. And I'm sure as elected officials, you kind of know if just wasn't workable. People weren't focusing on it in the way they were getting essentially little to no feedback at all and thinking this must not be a very important issue. Well, of course, you know this is a very important issue. So we were able to come up with some forums and some communication that helped the municipal voice coalesce and then be communicated very clearly to the county, and it's resulted in significant rewrites of original sections of their draft of this new ordinance. We're in kind of the, well, maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the final process, and it's again been a very positive event thus far. So just a few examples of the kind of things that we have provided recently, and we're certainly both here able to answer any kind of questions. Mayor Craig Moore, from the experience of having been a member and how they've benefited in Hanover Park.
Well, once again, Mayor Craig, thank you for coming here, and thank you as well, Mark. We appreciate it. And I saw Mayor Grasso this morning, and he gave his apologies for not being able to be here tonight, although, of course, then we are now blessed with your presence, so that's a good thing. But I know that Mayor Grasso would have been here, too, if he was able to. With that, open up for questions or comments from members of the council with respect to the possibility of returning to DuPage mayors and managers. I obviously have commented recently on my experiences in attending some of the events in the 6 months that I've been in office, and I think that now more than ever, the need for cooperation, collaboration, and communication with many other organizations, both public and private, is more important than ever before, and certainly with our peers. And so I see a high amount of value, not only conceptually, but in some of the meetings that I've actually attended, where the ability to network and interact and problem solve with our fellow municipalities I think is more critical today than ever before. I'll report later on some of the things that were discussed at this morning's Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus meeting, but just some of the ideas about how to share services or even consolidate organizations to immediately reduce costs and yet maintain services to shared constituents, I think is something you can't do that by definition on your own. You have to do that by working with somebody else. But I'll just start off the conversation. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I support us rejoining the organization. I know I was one that did not support our membership when we voted to get to, terminate our relationship. But I think over the time that has elapsed, a learning process on both sides has occurred. I think we've worked it out under the leadership of Mayor Tully and Manager Fieldman, expressing our concerns, especially under the new mayoral leadership here. And I'm pleased to see that there has been an agreement. And I know I've spoken to the mayor when he asked me my opinions, and also to the manager about becoming on or getting on the board of directors, which eventually will become a leadership, the leader of the organization. So I do support this 100%. I just have one quick question, and I know it's probably going to put you on the spot, Mark, but and who knows, maybe it was talked at the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus this morning. If Mayor Rahm Emanuel goes through with his water rate hike, how would the mayors and managers address that? Because that would impact all of us. As you may or may not know, we have some significant increases in our water rates here, and to throw that on top of what we've already done, it'll be almost 100% increase. So how would, if that were to come through, what steps, what process would mayors and managers take?
I can't give you a definitive final solution at this point, but I can tell you, in fact, what's already going on. We have worked to set up, through the Metro Mayor's Caucus, a group that's going to sit down with Chicago officials, their water commissioner, their budget director, representatives of Rahm Emanuel's office, and we hope Mayor Emanuel on occasion as well, to talk about, first to fully understand what is being implied, what statutorily and contractually under the contract between Chicago and the DuPage Water Commission is allowed. There's some question about if all of the fees that are really about infrastructure and maintenance can be passed on. So we need to do some fact-finding to begin with, and then also work to try to negotiate a policy that's going to work for everybody. I think there was a real understanding that the time is very different than when the regulations were set that could allow for this massive pass-through of costs. So we're going to look for a way to work with the city of Chicago if we can.
Okay.
And then, it depends. If push comes to shove, we'll have to see ultimately where we end up with that and what possibilities. But we're hoping to maintain an open communication with Mayor Emanuel and with the people in his staff to find some way to address this in a way that they can make the improvements that are needed, and the folks that are expending funds toward that are appropriately benefited, the ones who are appropriately benefited by those improvements.
Great. Well, I commend you for that, because I know that it's something that's coming around the corner, and, you know, being, you know, proactive than reactive, I think is the best way to do it. And just as a side note, I've been active with the mayors and managers since I was first elected in Darien, which is a few years ago, and am active through my professional career as well. So I know it's a premier cog in the industry and in the area, and I hope that there'll be other support for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Waldeck?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you both for coming tonight. I know I missed meeting with Mayor Craig, who chaired our Transportation Committee a few years ago. I enjoyed that. I always valued our membership in mayors and managers since I first came up here, and I was disappointed that we took the step we did and left. I think we could accomplish more by participation. I know it's difficult to have a regional group with everybody agreeing with everything all the time, and it's quite a challenge, and I think we need to know our role, that we do have to work with others. We shouldn't be isolationist, and that it also, if we do support rejoining mayors and managers, that it's also incumbent on us to take an active role. I hate signing, or it's very disappointing that people sign up for things and not participate. So I look forward to joining the group, rejoining the group, and also for being an active participant and being part of the region again.
And we would look forward to having you back, and as you're well aware that all of us together can come up 95% of the time, I believe. We have a strong consensus, and I like the value of our communication from different parts of the county. We all bring different things, and the outcome usually exceeds anything that we've come up with individually. So we do have some good dialogue, and it's the whole collaboration of all of us together.
Excellent point.
That consensus. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Schnell?
Just a comment, or two comments, actually. One, I think in the year since we chose not to join mayors and managers, one of the things that really has come up is that there are issues that we need to work collaboratively on. And the voice of many is much stronger than the voice of one. So that in itself, I think, is a really important reason to rejoin. The Water Commission and the Lake Michigan Water and the City of Chicago, we could never affect change or even affect to understand what was going on by ourselves, but I think together we would have the ability to do that. I think something else that we've kind of not talked about is really the effect that us not joining has had on staff. And I think that the ability of staff to interact with other staff members throughout the county has, over the past years, allowed for an exchange of ideas, which has been good for our staff, but I think has been good for other staff members throughout DuPage County, because our staff is, I believe, is front runners in a lot of things, and I think they have a lot to offer. And I think from that point of view, the benefits to everyone to again, work collaboratively as staff is important. So I think that's something that, from my point of view, would be another reason for rejoining. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to diverge just a little bit. I thought, I for some reason was under the impression that we were going to have a separate meeting on this subject with this body and with folks from the DMMC. You know, everything we've said tonight is, you know, kind of rainbows and unicorns. Obviously, we're better as a team. More voices speaking is better than one. We can get a lot of value out of collaboration. We left for a reason, a fairly long list of specific reasons. And, you know, with a full agenda tonight, I'm certainly not much interested in getting into every one of those with you guys, but I sure need to at some point. Was I misunderstanding the process forward, or what? That's what I thought was going on, and I was kind of looking forward to that.
In terms of a separate meeting?
Yeah.
Well, the good news is regardless of whatever the understanding was, I actually was under a different understanding, but doesn't matter. The point is that we're not going to vote on this for 2 weeks, because we don't meet next week. Our next meeting will be in November, and so I think there's time to certainly arrange whatever communications might be necessary. So out of respect for your time and also allowing Commissioner Barnett as much time as he would like, or anyone else up here, I think we could probably arrange that offline. We don't have to make a decision for 2 weeks, and so we've got some time to work through whatever it is that any of us up here need to have. I just had the benefit of having attended a number of different meetings in the last 6 months, so I've been able to witness things firsthand, and I certainly don't want to foist that upon my colleagues. I think everyone needs to reach their own decision. I'll save my comments for later, but would that be a sufficient way to proceed, Commissioner?
Yeah, although I'd like to not have it, I mean, I'd like us all to benefit from the dialogue. You know, if
Sure.
if I were to submit a few questions and get some written email answers, that's not a very workshop-ish kind of a thing, you know?
I couldn't agree with you more. Why don't we talk offline? We can
Okay.
set something up with the manager and see what makes sense for everybody, obviously consistent with everyone's schedule,
Okay,
if that makes sense.
that's fine.
For the moment, any other questions or comments of either Mayor Craig or Mr. Beloga? Let me just add real quickly that I don't want it to suggest that I take issue with what the decision was that was made previously, because I think Commissioner Burnett's absolutely right. There were good reasons for it, and I'm not suggesting they were right or wrong or indifferent. That was then, this is now, and some things have changed. I mean, the world has changed, quite frankly. And as I said before, the value of collaboration, cooperation, and communication with our peers is more important today than ever before. And particularly when we talk about consolidating and shared services, you can't do that by yourself by definition, as I said earlier. And I also want to pick up on a comment that a number of my colleagues have made, and that is the other difference, if you will, is that we do plan on taking a very active role, more so than I would measure that we had in the previous decade. If we come back, we're going to come back with a vengeance, so to speak, and look forward to working with the entire organization in a leadership role. I think that's probably part of what our goal is, to the extent that we want to, help shape the organization. We'll put our money where our mouths are and actually work to do that. And I think, as was pointed out, the organization itself has changed in the time that we've been away, and we've learned a few things. Sometimes couples that know each other for a long time benefit from spending a little time apart, and we've had the opportunity to spend a little time apart. So there's always a chance of reconciliation. Let me pause there and ask if there are any questions or comments for anyone in the audience with respect to this item. And gentlemen, I think we have somebody coming up, so if you want to stay close to the microphone, I'd appreciate it, just in case there's a question that you're more capable of answering than we are. We'd appreciate it.
Good evening,
Good
Mayor.
evening, Mr.
Council.
LeCren.
My name is Tom LeCren, 545 Chicago Avenue. I wholeheartedly agree with what Commissioner Barnett said. We left for good reasons. That was not a decision that was made lightly, or we left for very good reasons. I've seen nothing in the presentations tonight that would cause me to say, well, what's changed since then as to now? And if you have a meeting between the that group and ourselves, that's got to be a public meeting, if I'm not correct.
Any meeting that needs to be public will be a public meeting.
And how much advance notice will we get that meeting is going to take place? Because I'm sure.
Don't know yet. We just talked about it about 10 minutes ago.
Okay, but I mean, we've got a short time frame if you're talking about voting on it in 2 weeks from now. I think there's a lot more things. One of the things I'd like to see is the bang for the buck. What are we getting for all it? $18,000? What are we getting for it? What do we do for it? How is that money spent? For example, of the $18,000, how much goes to salaries and benefits? I'm certain the staff must get paid. So those are the kinds of things, questions. I think you should move slowly and openly with the public and yourselves and everyone else to completely vet this process. Because the other thing is, for example, we pay big money to a private lobbyist. Would that go away? Or would we keep that? They have lobbyists. I thought their group was supposed, the group is supposed to lobby for us.
That's right. The lobbyist only gets paid if the lobbyist works for us. And right now, there's no outstanding assignments. So the answer is it's not duplicative.
But we have money in the budget for them.
There is,
And we spent a good amount of money.
but on a going forward basis, there's no specific engagement that we're committed to.
Keep it public and open, that's what I
No question about that. Thank you, Mr. Lukrein. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience on this item? Very good. Well, gentlemen, again, Mayor Craig, thank you. Mark, thank you for coming. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of an ordinance annexing the property at 5899 Walnut Street. This is a voluntary petition to annex. It's consistent with the annexation strategies and plans that we've talked about over the last few years. If the council has any questions, Tom Dabereiner from Community Development is here to answer those. Staff does recommend approval of this annexation.
Any questions or comments from anyone on the council?
Nope.
Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience?
The next item on tonight's first reading agenda is the further discussion of the stormwater utility. This is the fourth of four presentations. Tonight we'll hear some recommendations from staff and our consultant, MFSG. These recommendations are of a broad nature concerning the creation of a stormwater utility and general information about fees. You will not hear any recommendations tonight about some of the details such as billing administration, things of that nature. We are not actually seeking direction tonight, just further conversation. We will be seeking direction from the council probably in early to mid-November, at which time the options will be, should we continue exploring this? If the answer is yes, a public engagement and education and information sharing process will ensue, or in the alternative, the council could direct staff to stop looking into this issue. So tonight is fourth of four presentations for further discussion, and David Hyder from MFSG is here tonight to present again.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dave. Mayor, council members, it's good to see you again. As Dave mentioned, tonight we're going to focus in on the recommendations, but first off, we do want to go over a little bit of the background on the study. So we want to provide a study overview, give you a background on where we've been. We then want to focus in on what the specific big picture recommendations are that we have for the study. Again, want to remind you of where we've been in terms of the last, I guess, 2 months. In early August, we met to talk about the background and the overview of what a stormwater utility looks like, some of the big policy issues that had to be discussed, which we have discussed in workshops 2 and 3. Second workshop in the middle of September, we talked about the level of service, what it costs to operate the stormwater system, and the magnitude of the fee. Workshop 3, we looked at 2 weeks ago, we looked at the stormwater fee analysis, what a potential basis for that fee would be, and also talked briefly about a credits program. And then tonight, workshop 4, we're going to focus on recommendations. So first off, taking you through the stormwater overview, just want to step back a minute and remind you of the assets that you have in the stormwater system. The stormwater system was built over the last 80 years, so it's taken a long time to bring it to where it is today. And it cost a lot of money to build, and it's going to cost a lot of money to replace. And as we know, it costs a lot to maintain these assets. Stormwater system contains 3 major watersheds, 11 miles of streams. About 2/3 of the village is drained by storm sewers, consisting of 130 miles of storm sewer mains. About 1/3 of the village is drained by ditches, 140 miles of ditches. And the village stormwater system includes about 315 stormwater
The protocol is typically to do that when you're asked a really tough question. That's how you buy time.
Is that a first? It's happened before? Okay, good. All right. Didn't want to be the first. All right, so moving on. Level of service, we talked about that in workshop 2, and again, the building blocks level of service, operating and maintenance expenses, your day-to-day operating the stormwater utility, outstanding debt service, you have to repay any debt that you've issued, and then on top of that, we need to fund planned capital improvements, both expansions of the system and repairs and replacements. The total of that would give us our current level of service or the cost of operating the stormwater system. So here's the forecast that we provided under the current level of service. You can see the operating and maintenance expenses in 2013 are estimated to be about $1.6 million, increasing to about $1.9 million over the 5-year period. You have existing debt payments for the 2008 bond issue. Those will be paid off by 2038. They're pretty much level payments. You're paying more in interest now than you are in principal, but like a mortgage, that changes over time. And then the last component is capital maintenance and replacement. You're spending about $500,000 in 2013. That's going to ramp up to 1.7 by 2016. You can see the total level of service in 2013 of $3.3 million, ramping up to about $4 million by 2017. This is the current stated level of service. Under this level of service, particularly I wanted to mention within the maintenance and replacement of the lines, spending about $500,000 a year results in about a 220-year replacement cycle of your mains. So if you maintain that current spending level, it will take you 220 years to replace your current mains at the 130 miles of mains. So that's the current level of service. We also looked at a recommended level of service, which builds upon that current level. You can see again the current level shown there. In addition to that, we have recommended incremental O&M expenses. And these expenses were developed based upon your stormwater master plan that was completed in 2006. It identified the necessary spending levels and maintenance to meet your NPDES permit. And then on top of that, we have capital, recommended incremental capital, which includes additional replacement as well as funding the watershed improvements. The recommended capital would get you more in line in a sustainable replacement cycle, would put you on about a 100-year replacement cycle of your stormwater mains. So that's an overview of the current level of service and the recommended level of service. Then wanted to refresh your memory briefly on the current revenues. In 2013, the estimated revenues for stormwater activities are a total of $2.5 million. You can see the various components, most of it being property taxes, $815,000 from the general fund, a little bit from developer contributions, property taxes to repay the debt, and then property taxes for stormwater maintenance. So again, the majority of the current revenues are property taxes, 2.5. So naturally, when we compare those current revenues with the stated level, current level of service, as well as the recommended level of service, we can identify that there's a fairly sizable funding gap, particularly with the recommended level of service. In 2013, we're looking at about a $3.2 million shortfall if you attempted to fund the recommended level of service in that particular year. It should be noted that 2013, your current stated revenues will not provide sufficient funds to fund your current level of service. Therefore, you would have to reduce your level of service if you don't increase revenues. So that's the level of service, the funding gap analysis. Next, I want to remind you what we talked about last week, where we talked about the potential unit of measure for the stormwater fee, which we would recommend that you'd use impervious area. It is an industry best practice. Impervious area, again, is any area on a property where water can't penetrate. The reason it's an industry best practice is it relates directly to the runoff and the demand on the stormwater system. If you have more impervious, you're going to generate more stormwater. And fortunately, this data is readily available within the village. We know the impervious area on all the parcels within the village. As shown here in the chart, you can see the breakdown of impervious. That's in square footage. The majority or the biggest piece is within residential at 47%, 36% is commercial, and then about 8% each for industrial and tax exempt. So that's a picture of the rate base. And we wanted to again mention that we think this is a real important slide that compares the current way that you collect revenues. The left-hand side of the pie chart here shows the current revenue allocation, so how you currently collect revenues for stormwater activities. You get about 76% of your revenues from residential customers for stormwater, 21% from commercial. And then over to the right, bringing back up the impervious area, again, you get 76% of your revenue from residential customers, but only 47% of the impervious area is residential in nature. So there is an inherent inequity in the current structure. You're collecting a lot of revenues from a customer class or a property group that don't have as much impervious in line with the amount of revenue you're collecting. That's an important comparison there. So that's the overview. That's where we've been. Now we want to talk about our recommendations and spend the majority of the time here. So our first recommendation is that we do think that the village should implement a stormwater utility and a stormwater fee. There's a number of reasons why we think it's the appropriate thing to do. The first is that, as just mentioned, it would improve the equity. The current approach does not have the equity that an impervious area fee-based approach would have. The improved equity would also allow you to reduce property taxes to better shift how revenues are collected. It would also allow for fiscal accountability. The stormwater fee itself that would be collected would be based upon the level of service. It wouldn't be based on a tax rate or anything like that. And those revenues that are collected could only be used for stormwater activities, just like in the water fund or the water system. It would provide a dependable revenue stream. If you look back at the history of revenues for stormwater, they've been highly volatile, up and down. When you have a dependable revenue stream, such as a fee, you know how much revenue you're going to collect. Therefore, you can manage the system better. You can be proactive in your management versus reactive. Typically, the way stormwater works currently is if you have a big event, maybe stormwater rises to the forefront and gets some additional funding, but that's typically how it works. If there's routine maintenance, doesn't get it done to the level that it should because you don't have that dependable revenue stream. And lastly, there would be increased public awareness. Just going through this exercise has brought the issues related to the stormwater utility or stormwater activities to the public's awareness. A fee brings that even greater awareness. It allows the public to understand the magnitude of the investments that you're making in the stormwater system. And it also allows the public to take action to mitigate stormwater on their property, make better decisions when they're reconstructing or putting in impervious area, things of that sort. In terms of the fee structure, we talked about this a lot last week. We do recommend that when you implement the fee that you do use impervious area. It's an industry best practice. We have the data. And that you base it on equivalent runoff units. Looking at the two classes, we'd recommend that for single-family residential, you do a tiered ERU approach, like we talked about last week. So those with impervious area from 1 to 2,500 square feet would pay 0.75 of an ERU. The average impervious falling in the middle there with the 2,500 to 4,000 being 1 ERU, and then the large ERUs paying 1.5. Again, the average impervious for single-family residential in the village is 3,300 square feet. Non-single-family residential should be based upon the actual impervious area turned into equivalent ERUs, so multiples of the 3,300 square feet. In terms of the administration of the stormwater utility, we do recommend that the village assess the stormwater fee to all properties, that there should be no exemptions, and that you should offer credits for on-site stormwater management. We talked a lot about that last week. A lot of the discussion was around credits and a credit program. I do want to emphasize that a well-designed credit program should really focus on offering credits to properties that have the opportunity to actually reduce stormwater impact. Really, that should be your primary focus, at least initially, to zero in on offering credits and reductions to those that really can reduce the stormwater runoff from their property. And also just to limit the complexity of the program, at least initially. As you get this off the ground, assuming it would move forward, this is one of the administrative burdens that could result if you have an extremely complex credit program. And lastly, you got to realize that any reductions that you offer via credits will result in increased fees. So if we give everybody a 50% reduction, we're going to get 50% of the revenue we thought, and we would have to increase the fee that much more. So those are the key points in terms of a well-designed credit program. In terms of the recommendation for the funding level and how we think you should roll out the fee, we think you should fund in 2013 the current level of service, as we recommended, the $3.5 million. And to fund that approach, we would recommend that you reduce the current property tax funding from the $2.5 million, reduce that down to just pay for the existing debt service, which is $1.1 million, and that you continue to do that for the life of the loan. So you continue to have some property taxes funding the stormwater utility, but just funding the property taxes. And then we recommend that you implement a stormwater fee that funds that gap between the existing debt service, or from the $1.1 million up to the $3.5 million. A number of reasons why we recommend that. We think you need to, and reasons why we're not recommending jumping immediately to the recommended level of service. If you think about on a parallel with the water system, we knew that you weren't funding enough on the water system, yet we designed phased-in rates to minimize the impact and things of that sort. Also, as we're rolling this out, if we immediately became completely dependent upon stormwater fees, if there were some administrative hiccups or things of that sort, we would be out of revenue stream for stormwater activities. So the way this plays out, again, here's your current revenues shown here, 2013, general fund funding, developer contributions, the property tax levy for stormwater maintenance, and then the current stormwater fee of 0. On to the right, you would see the proposed general fund would go to 0. We would get rid of the property tax levy. The stormwater fee would generate $2.3 million, which would allow us to fund our stated level of service, current level of service at $3.5 million. The net result there is that you would have a reduction in property taxes of $1.33 million in 2013. So there would be a net reduction in property taxes. How this plays out, to fund that gap between the existing debt service and the stated level of service, you can see what the stormwater fees would be. So it would be $420 per month for a Tier 1 residential, $560 for a Tier 2. That's the average where most of your properties fall within the village. Tier 3 would be $840, and the non-single residential would be based on the multiples of the ERUs at $560. So we do have some examples here of impacts based upon the recommended fees. 2013, here's the monthly fee for various property types within the village. So obviously the single-family residential we've talked about. The average church with 18 ERUs would pay about $100 per month. The hospital and the university, we've assumed because of the significant stormwater facilities with mitigation activities on their sites, we've assumed a 50% credit. So you can see what their fee would be. And then some other examples, with the average commercial being 20 ERUs at about $112 per month. We want to take you through a few more just real-world examples. This is a home within the village that falls into the Tier 1. You can see the impervious here shaded in red. The total impervious on this property is about 1,700 square feet. And that would fall within the Tier 1 of 0.75 ERUs. And therefore, they would pay $420 per month. We did calculate, assuming you reduce property taxes by $1.33 million, this property would see a property tax reduction turned into a monthly basis amount of $4.73. So that would exceed the amount that they would pay in the stormwater fee. So if you do reduce property taxes by $1.33 million, again, turning their property tax reduction into a monthly amount would be a reduction of $4.73 for this property. We have another property, a little bit different here, narrow property. The impervious is shown here. Very similar impervious area, about 1,700 square feet. Again, they would fall into the 0.75 ERUs. They have a lower assessed value, though, on this property. They would pay $420 in a stormwater fee. Their property tax reduction would be $2.90. And again, that's a monthly amount, taking the annual property tax reduction and turning it into a monthly amount, assuming you'd reduce property taxes. Two more examples here within the Tier 2. So this would be more of the average. This property has 3,200 square feet of impervious. Therefore, they fall in the 1 ERU, very average property in terms of impervious. They would pay $560. Their property tax reduction on a monthly basis would be $6.25. Next example, again, falls in Tier 2. Very average, 3,200 square feet, falls in a Tier 2, so it has 1 ERU. They'd pay $560 in a stormwater fee. Their property tax reduction would be $5.80 for this particular property. And then we have two more examples that would fall within the Tier 3. So these are properties with significantly more impervious. This one has 5,000 square feet of impervious, so they would fall within that Tier 3 range, 1.5 ERUs. So they would pay $840 a month in a stormwater fee. Property tax reduction for this property would be $7.36 per month. And then finally, our last sample, residential, Tier 3, 5,000 square feet, almost 5,100 square feet of impervious, 1.5 ERUs, so they pay $840, property tax reduction of $7.80. So that gives you a feel for the impact on a range of residential properties within the village in 2013, looking at the recommended stormwater fees. But we did want to address, that's just in 2013, we wanted to address the long term. We think over time you do need to get to the recommended level of service because a 220-year replacement cycle for your mains isn't sustainable, nor will you eventually, there would be concerns whether you could meet your permit under NPDES if you're not meeting their master plan recommendations for maintenance and items like that. So we do recommend that over a long-term period, you move towards providing the recommended level of service. Recommend that you consider doing that over a 10-year period. So you'd incrementally increase the stormwater fees annually to reach the recommended level of service by 2022, again, a 10-year period. If you were to do annual increases in order to get there, you'd have to do a 17% increase every single year for 10 years to get to the recommended level of service. Realizing that in 2022 it costs more to maintain the system due to inflation and things of that sort. So it's not a static level of service, you could say. So in summary, we believe the implementation of the recommendations will accomplish a number of things. First off, we'll bring the level of funding for the stormwater up to the current level of service. Under the current approach, you will not be able to fund your current level of service in 2013. There aren't sufficient revenues. It would allow you to reduce the property tax levy by $1.33 million if you chose to do so. It will begin addressing the inequity between the current funding approach. If you remember the inequity of the current approach with residential paying more than they should due to the property tax. It would put in place a dedicated revenue stream that would allow for fiscal accountability, that would generate $2.4 million in revenues that would specifically be dedicated to stormwater. It does maintain a source of funding for existing debt service, so it mitigates the financial instability potentially as shifting to a stormwater fee. And lastly, the stormwater fee would encourage on-site stormwater management. So we are now open for questions and discussion.
Well, thank you very much. And I know that the real decision tonight is whether to keep working on this or not, or whether we go off another direction, not necessarily to start checking off boxes or picking numbers or things like that.
Right, and actually, we're just more interested, frankly, in the discussion and questions you may come up with, and then we'll put on for a first reading in early or mid-November the actual question, should we keep going or should we stop here?
Okay, so we're actually one step even before what I just said.
Yes.
All right. Well, again, it strikes me that, you know, there are only so many options that one has. It's either do nothing, which seems to be an unacceptable choice, to continue funding it the way it is, which seems to be just ridiculously unfair and ineffective, or to do something different. And what we're proposing is doing something different. And I suppose there are yet still different things to do. You could put it on the telecommunications tax, I suppose, but that's not only unstable, but has absolutely nothing to do with stormwater runoff. So this seems to be the most logical approach in terms of equity and relation to the subject that you're trying to address. And also you've got the benefit of potentially some behavior modification that actually goes to the greater good. But I appreciate the presentation. I mean, I think we're now getting to a level where, yeah, it's answering a lot of questions about how things would actually operate and function and how it would look and how it would impact, you know, real properties here in our community. So I'll just open it up to questions or comments from members of the council. Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it was around now in 2006 that we had probably one of our worst storms and flooding events in our Downers Grove history. I think it was like October 6th or 7th, 2006, which prompted in 2007 and 8 the watershed infrastructure improvement plan, which outlined our current set of projects and goals with stormwater management. And, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, and, you know, we've made a lot of improvements since 2008 when we started those projects, some really big projects like Washington Park and McCollum, and a lot of in-street repairs and improvements. And, you know, thinking about this, in order to keep those projects maintained and actually viable for our residents, we need to find a way to get some revenue to maintain them. But there's still a lot of projects that need to be done also. And I think as we go forward, something like this in the stormwater utility is a way to continue the maintenance and the infrastructure that we need for stormwater. We've done a great job because we've had some big storms between now and 2006, and there's obvious improvements out there in the village. As we go forward, I think I know I'll be in favor of getting some more details about this, but some of the details that I'll be interested in seeing include the more information on the credits. Obviously, we talked about that last week about some of the commercial, industrial, non-taxed or tax-exempt properties. This one, I don't know if we brought up, I think somebody might have, the actual billing mechanisms. I know this is getting way ahead of it, but it's on my list here, something I thought of tonight. Different mechanisms for billing, how we can make it as user-friendly for our residents and customers. And then, of course, this kind of goes to our staff as the public education component. I know Commissioner Schnell often talks about that. This is a big deal. It's something that we need to really enforce and reinforce with our residents why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and how it's going to impact them. So these reports and these presentations have been fantastic. I think we're at a point now where we can work with the consultant and our staff to come up with an actual plan for implementation, but there's going to be some time that it takes. It's a long-range idea. It's kind of fitting into our long-range financial planning and the way that we've been budgeting in Downers Grove with a long-range look at sustainability and revenue sources that are directed at specific funds. So sitting here tonight with the information ahead of us, I think I will support going forward with continuing the discussion, trying to find ways that we can make this work for Downers Grove, but I think we've got a lot of the hard work done with these presentations. And last comment, the rebate or the abatement of the property tax levy is a huge component that I'm very satisfied to see was worked into this plan. And while it doesn't sound like a lot of money, it almost makes sense to me that we're not levying for that amount anymore for stormwater needs, but we're going to have a utility for it. So that's part of the discussion that I'm pleased to see. That's all I have for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell?
I have a question on slide 7, and I don't know whether I'm reading it wrong, but anything's possible. Under current level of service, under capital maintenance and replacement, it seems like between fiscal year of 15 and 17, the amount of money that we put into maintenance drops. In fact, it drops 185,000, 715,000, and goes to $1 million. Do you see what I'm saying? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's based on your specific capital improvement program. So you do have specific capital projects that would fall into the capital maintenance and replacement. Replacement of stormwater mains remains at $500,000 a year, but you do have specific capital projects in the form of capital maintenance that are programmed for 2015 and 16, and that's why it jumps up like that.
So basically, the fact that it goes down is a product of our budget, if you want to call it that, but the ability to pay for projects under the present level of service?
Actually, what I think this reflects is a couple of things, that the further out you go in those out years, the less accurate or those numbers are. I think it shows the trend, and it also reinforces that sometimes these capital maintenance items are lumpy. Those dollars jump up and down based on if you have a big project or not. I think the trend, though, of it increasing, generally increasing, if that line moves a little bit up and down, it's certainly going to increase over time, and we will fine-tune those numbers as we move along in the process.
Because if you go to the next slide, which is the recommended level of service, there's much more consistency to that line. That's the only reason that it jumped out.
Yeah, and
That's why it's recommended.
I think so.
well, and I can speak specifically to that, is that, one, we are recommending that you spend an additional $500,000 on main replacement, and that's going to increase a little bit each year by inflation. And then we did build into that program, assuming that you would fund watershed improvement projects, but that you would issue some debt in the 2014 to 15 timeframe. So that's layering on debt in those outer years. So that's the reason why it looks less lumpy.
Okay. I agree with Commissioner Neustadt, and I think we need to move forward with this. the educational component will be huge. We need to hear from our residents, and I think once they have a clearer understanding of what we're trying to do, then getting the information from them as to whether or not, I guess if they buy into this is the best way of putting it, but whether or not they think this is a reasonable approach, I think is valuable. As we do the educational component, I think one of the most important aspects from my perspective is really showing that this is a user fee, that you really are paying for, if you want to call it a user fee, but you're paying for the amount of runoff that is generated by your lot. You're not just paying a certain amount because your house is worth X or Y or whatever it is, but you're paying for actually the size of your house and the impervious amount that you have on your lot. And I think that's very, very important, because I think if that's explained to people and they have a better understanding of that, one, over time, they could make modifications to their lot to help improve that impervious area on their lot. So I think that's important. I also agree with Commissioner Neustadt in that as we look at credits, I think it's very important to get a better understanding of what we're going to give credits for, and if we're going to max out at the 50% or if we're going to allow credits to be larger than 50%. And I don't know that right now. I know in your presentation you had said maxing out at 50 is probably the best way, but I guess as we progress, I'd like more information as to why. I know financially that makes sense, but why, if some developer or someone has invested a lot of money in stormwater on their particular piece of property, why 50 would be the max. And again, I think it's more educational for me and for the community and for this council. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you.
Actually, you've made a believer out of me, which I know when Commissioner Tully and I sat in a committee many moons ago, I just was one of those doubting Thomases that went, this is ridiculous. But you've made it so that it's clearly understood, but you've also made it, I think from my perspective, financially responsible for our taxpayers and for our residents, because it makes much more sense to do stormwater management this way, or at least have it paid for in this way, than just putting everything on a residential tax bill. Somehow that doesn't seem fair. So kudos to you, and I think as we progress, hopefully we can explain this to our residents in the best way possible. So thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Before I call on Commissioner Durkin, just something that you said, Commissioner, made me think of. Obviously, we have to start somewhere with the program, and we're already talking about phasing things in over time, and obviously, as we learn in the field, there very well may be adjustments to the program, assuming that we do this down the road. So that lends to a question of, for those communities that have done a stormwater utility and have already implemented one, and that have any serious amount of experience under their belts in terms of implementing it and coming up with maybe situations where they've had to make adjustments because they're realizing how it works in the real world rather than on a PowerPoint slide. Maybe we can get some idea of what are the most common sort of mid-course adjustments that are made. Once people get into it, they find out, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to change that. Maybe there are no changes and people just start with one program and keep going, but I suspect that there may have been some examples where things have been tweaked. I'd just be curious to know what those typically are, if there are any that are typical. So, Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would support moving this forward and looking at it further in depth. I'm extremely interested in knowing more about the credits. I know that with our past experience, our education process with our residents and business community will be done to the best of our ability. So I have no doubt in my mind that we'll meet that expectation. But I also be interested in knowing from our partners, Economic Development Corporation, our Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where their positions are on such an issue. I know that this is a little bit bigger. This involves the community as a whole, but with their body, with their membership and who they represent, I think it'd be good to get some input from them so we get all sides of the aisle, if I can use that word. I understand, and I was trying to go through this presentation and the previous presentation, there are actually 3 levels that we could talk about with funding, and what staff and what you're recommending is the funding level at the bottom floor, which would be A. So you have A, B, C levels. Is it okay? I would like to see more information on the B level. I really would. And I'd like to know, if we were to do that, what the benefits were and what they are. Because as we know, when we raise property taxes to deal with stormwater, there's a significant problem. There is still significant dollars that need to be, or jobs that need to be done. And I think by taking this and trading that, basically the property tax bill to a new fee, and giving me back a credit of 80 cents a month, you know, to me, that's not solving our stormwater problem. And I know that we've had heavy rains, and I know we've been lucky where the rains have come in the warmer weather when we still have leaves on trees and not on the ground. But tomorrow I think will be a compelling story. Since we're going to get some heavy rains and there's a lot of leaves on our street, I think that we need to look at that, and I'd be interested in getting some additional information, especially I'm just interested in the next step up. I'm not saying I'm for it or not. I think it's imperative that we look at it because we do have significant needs that need to be met.
From a perspective of what the impact would be on the
Yeah,
example
what would
properties?
happen to, I mean, we've gotten this report saying, okay, I mean, all your different slides, you gave us, like, it's residential tier 3 would be 840, but if memory serves me right, I think it was what, 760 was their credit back a month on the tax, so they're gonna get 840 a bill, so, I mean, really, what's the savings there? 80, I mean, the expense, 80 cents?
We can have that information for you at the November presentation.
Yeah, the only reason I interrupted is I was just, it's a fair question. I was just curious what the scenario would be that we're looking at. Is it, you know, if you forgot about the credit for a second, you just sort of was a break-even scenario, for example, to see what that would look like and what those additional dollars might accomplish? Because I think what we're also talking about is eventually phasing into the recommended level of service, but over 10 years.
Yeah,
Or would it be a question of it we phased in over 5 years? And I just want to get an idea of what the scenario is, because I'm as interested in it as you are. I just want to know what
I guess
I'm
I'm a
looking
little,
at.
from what I'm hearing, I guess, and I've always had a more of aggressive approach, is, you know, why incur more flooding? I'd rather do more today, and I've been a preacher of this, do more today with today's dollars and trying to get something done at a discounted rate. And we've seen that in our budgets, where if we're going to be able to do it, you know, what would the consequences be? I mean, if you came to me and said, Sean, I'm going to give you 80-cent credit, and I don't even know if I'm a tier 3, I don't know. I'm going to get an 80-cent credit, or I'm going to pay 80 cents a month for this service. To me, you know, that's less than the Wall Street Journal a month, which is $10 a month. So to me, I'm just looking at it in my comparisons, and I know I'll probably get 1,000 emails or tweets or whatever you're going to do, but I am just more of an aggressive kind of guy when it comes to this stuff, and we're talking a few bucks. So that's where I'm at, and that's why I want to look at it. And I'd rather get it all out now and not read about myself about what they think I say. The other question I have, and I just want to confirm this, the monies that we raise on this, the profit, I don't want to say profit, that's my banking bird, I'm sorry, the operating income.
Banks don't make a profit.
Well, it depends who you talk to. B of A, they are in the profit industry. That is really a revenue stream for future bond uses, correct?
Yes, the money that is raised as part of the stormwater utility fee would be part of a sustainability funding plan that would allow us to issue debt in the future to cover the capital costs that David was talking about, and then be paid off. Those bonds in the future would be paid off by the revenue
By the
streams. that are
dedicated
discussed.
revenue
The
stream.
revenues from this.
From these revenues called the stormwater fee, yes.
Okay. I hope, April, you got all that. And that's all I have. I appreciate it, Mayor. Thank you.
No, thank you. I just wanted to see the pictures too, but I wanted to know what pictures we were going to be seeing.
The aggressive or...
Yeah, whether it's,
aggressive.
I think one was, just to be clear, one was a, you know, if we were to do the next tier, what the impact would be, sort of in those example that we looked at what's the current recommended, I'm sorry, the current level, excuse me. Gotta get my terminology straight here. Another way to look at it would be if you phased it in over 5 years instead of 10 years, I suppose would be another way to look at it.
Because over the 10 years, you're looking at, what is it, a 17% increase every year?
Right.
If we do it over 5 years, and you're just, you know,
Right. We'll probably leave it to you to suggest what would be
Yeah.
good snapshots to look at, but
Maybe it's
I think I understand the commissioner's point.
8.5 and not B. Maybe it's-
I had an extensive conversation with Commissioner Durkin, and there's a couple of scenarios and ways we can show that to you, so we'd like the opportunity to do that and bring it back.
I appreciate that. I just want to know what it is I'll be looking at when I see it, that's all.
How
Reminds
did
me-
Dave explain it?
It reminds me of a Supreme Court justice quote that I'll forego right now.
If I could respond, I just did want to say that we have been, in previous presentations, we showed 3 sets of fees. We showed if you funded the stormwater to 2.5 million to replace your current revenues, if you funded the current level of service at 3.5 million, and then if you funded the recommended level of service.
Right.
So what we've shown tonight isn't necessarily the lowest, just replacing current revenues. It would be a fee that would fund up to the 3.5 for current level of service,
The
but
current level of service with the right amount of funding.
correct.
The first level was lacking, like we weren't doing.
Correct.
that.
First level was, so you actually want to see C.
Yeah, possible.
This is
Yeah, I'm clear though.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah. But anyway,
I also want to make sure that you get what you're asking.
Well, no, I talked to Dave extensively the last couple of days about this, so.
Okay. Very good. Commissioner Rankin.
I was not a fan of the stormwater utility, but you've done a great job at explaining the equity and making it fair for the residents and making the people that benefit from the stormwater system pay fairly for it. I have a question about the residential credit. You have to limit that, right? Since it's such a minimal amount we're getting from a household, you don't want them to be able to totally waive their fee.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of utilities, a lot of localities that have stormwater utilities don't offer credits to residential just because of the fact that there's very little that you can do on a residential property to reduce the true stormwater impact. Not that you shouldn't, there are utilities that do it. You certainly want to consider that, and that's really a policy of the council as to whether you do. But, you know, for example, if you have a 1-inch storm on a 1,000 square foot of roof, that generates a lot of water in terms of runoff. And, you know, if you have 1 rain barrel or 2 rain barrels, they can only capture 55 gallons of stormwater or rain in each of those rain barrels. So, you know, how much can you really reduce your stormwater impact if you have a rain barrel? Now, from a policy standpoint, it may be that we want to encourage people to have rain barrels, and we want to, you know, make this more community buy-in, and so therefore we would have a policy where we would offer some fairly minimal credit if you do have a rain barrel or something like that. If you have a big property though and you're residential and you put in pervious pavement, you know, that's an expense, significant expense to the property owner, and they could have a significant reduction in their stormwater. So you do need to consider those. It's just a matter of how complex you want to get. If you think about your water utility, you're a lot more sophisticated today than you were when you first started that utility. You don't need to do this all at once, would be one caution. And you know, it's very normal to change course every year in terms of, you know, adjusting how your policy is. You do want it to fit with your stormwater ordinance and what the county's doing, and so there will be changes that evolve over time.
And the other thing is important here, not to interrupt, but I don't think we're anticipating that people are all going to run out and start digging up their backyards and turning them into giant rainwater storage tanks. But as development and redevelopment takes place and things happen, to the extent that we can encourage through some kind of a credit somebody to put in a pervious driveway, and you can go to places like the Arboretum to see what they look like, or to put in a sizable, it's not just a rain barrel, but something that will seriously hold a lot of rainwater. You're now maybe having someone convinced to do that otherwise wouldn't do it, and that actually does benefit the whole neighborhood. I think I view it as more in that category than people are going to run out and start. Everyone's going to put in a 60 by 60 rain garden or something like that.
I would also like to hear more about Sean's concept. If we're going to go this route, I think we should have all that information. So on slide 18, you talk about that $815,000 from the general fund we're using now. So that can be used for other projects if we go forward with the stormwater utility.
If it's taken off of the property tax levy, we will not have that money anymore. If the council chooses to keep all of it or some of it on the property tax, then we would have that revenue available for other projects.
No, I mean, and maybe I'm not understanding it. The general fund, we use $815,000 from the general fund right now, but that's not part of the property.
It is mostly from property tax
Okay, I'm
revenues,
sorry,
and
that's
all of it is
misunderstanding.
spent on stormwater maintenance activities currently.
So it wouldn't be spent on it anymore because we would have the fee.
Correct. And this proposal recommends that we no longer levy that $815,000, so it would not be available if we reduce the property tax by $1.33 million.
Because we're not levying the 815 and we're not levying
The
the
511.
511.
Correct.
Okay, I understand that better. Thank you.
But if it were levied, it could be a source of revenue for other capital projects, including paying towards increased, some other debt issuance for streets or sidewalks or the other things. But that's another policy issue.
And my last thing, I really think it's important to reduce the property tax levy as part of this, because if we're saying that we're going to be charging people for what they're doing, I think that's an important part of the puzzle. So, thank you.
Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank you for your presentation as usual. I continue to restore my faith in consultants. You do you guys have always done a very good job, and it continues.
He's not kidding when he says it, by the way.
Yeah. And I was also surprised with Commissioner Schnell's comment about, I always thought you were rather positive back, a decade ago on the stormwater.
She was just being polite to me.
Okay. Well, I took your politeness as approval, so I guess we saw eye to eye, and I'm beginning to change mine a little bit. Commissioner Durkin is concerned about, the hurry to get things done, and my concern is always with the debt. So if we can take as one of the scenarios, a kind of a pay-as-you-go, since some of the money that we're forecasting out is to issue more debt, I'd rather look at it as trying to avoid picking up more debt. So if we can have that, I would appreciate it. Credits, I always wonder, the people on the high ground and the low ground, they all get rain, but the people in the LPDAs, if your basement's flooding all the time, maybe you should get 100% credit. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do with people that currently flood, is what it amounts to, and then we're going to charge them for stormwater. I don't know. Maybe we ought to make exceptions there. My basement floods every time. Instead of a rain garden, I got a basement, so.
It would only work that way if you could keep it there for a week.
That's right.
It could happen. Not me, but, we've heard some horror stories, and I would hate to adversely affect those folks financially as well. I was staring at the same slide 18 that Commissioner Rankin was looking at, and I thought part of the, I looked at that 2008 bond repayment, and that goes out to 2038, so I guess the good news, folks, is if you're here for the long haul, you might be able to look for a reduction in property tax after we pay that off. So that's in 2038, something to look forward to, I guess. And then I look at the general fund, and I didn't know that, wasn't sure that was coming from property taxes. I thought that was coming from the quarter-cent home rule sales tax that we levy.
The general fund contribution to stormwater is directly from the general fund to expenses in the stormwater. So technically, the revenues reflect the pie chart of all the general fund revenues. 25% property tax, 25% sales tax, and then the other components that are in your budget book. But this proposal, for purposes of trying to achieve that equity and the reduction of the property tax, would take all of those $815,000 off of the general corporate levy of the village.
So that quarter-cent home rule sales tax would disappear?
We'll have to get you a report on the impact on the quarter-cent sales tax.
Okay. Because, I was thinking how equitable that would be. We are, that's collected by businesses that I think would tend to have more parking space, more impervious. Now I'm just conjecturing that they would have more impervious, parking lot type situations, and would probably be stuck paying more. Maybe with this home rule sales tax, that portion of it going away, and then picking up the additional you know, might be good for the business angle of it, I'm not sure. But, yeah, the impact of the home rule sales tax on the whole stormwater utility scenario, I'd like to know about. And that's all I have right now, and just for the record, yeah, let's keep the presentations going and we'll look into this further. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions that don't need answers tonight. One is I'd like to know if it's possible to quantify the effects of, you know, as Mayor Tully said when we started, we have to do something here. So this is one possible means by which we would address the lack of funding that we really need for our stormwater system. So certainly one other possible means is just to make that change, to use that slide as an example of $1 million in property tax. I'd like to know if there's any possible way, either through experience you guys have elsewhere or from census data or something, that we might be able to quantify the effects on our residents of that deductibility. You know, not all of them apply, not all of them, you know, get it. I understand that. But one significant difference is this fee versus tax issue in my mind is that deductibility aspect of it. Another question I had was, we had some modeling on those, I think it was 6 residential properties in the tier 1, 3, and we had kind of anecdotal commentary on the tax decrease that would be reflected by that $1.33 million reduction. I'd like to see the same data or same modeling for some of the commercial properties. There was that table that listed, you know, churches and the university and the hospital. If we could get a similar sort of what if from a property tax standpoint on those parcels as well. Another thing that I'd like to see is the, and this is probably going to engender a little chuckle up here, but stormwater, one of the things that is a factor in our stormwater system, and we have, as we know, at least in the last 2 years, we've struggled with funding on all fronts. And so when Commissioner Durkin has talked about leaf pickups, you know, that generates all kinds of reactions about should we be picking up leaves instead of doing whatever the list of 32 other things is. But leaves are certainly a detrimental component to our stormwater system. And I'd just like to know, maybe it's in notes from the past when Commissioner Durkin's brought it up, but what would the cost of such a program be in dollars? Because if we're going to talk about trying to get to a recommended service level over a 10-year period, maybe it's time to talk about some trying to avoid throwing all those annual leaves down our storm sewers. I think probably jump into a conclusion that's not fair for my colleagues, but I think we've chosen not to do that simply as a function of not having the money to do it, not from the technical decisions about the effects it has on the system. I think it's been with our existing equipment, our existing budget, it's not something we can do. I think everybody would like to keep them out of the system if we could. So I'd like to hear a little bit more commentary on that subject as we're talking about a 10-year program of getting to a recommended service level.
Well, let me jump in on that because I'm actually very glad that you raised that. Because in the past, when Commissioner Durkin and I have talked about this issue, one of the challenges that we have with respect to a true leaf pickup program that would remove leaves from the street rather than, you know, raking them up, putting them in a bag and subsidizing it, but a true system where you rake to the curb and then a machine comes by and takes them away. Obviously, leaves and storm sewer systems are mortal enemies, no question about it. You want to keep the leaves out of the storm drains because otherwise it defeats the purpose. But one of the big problems is that, glad you opened the door, curb and gutter. Part of the problem with not being able to do that is you got to have a curb to actually rake the leaves to. And there's a good segment of our community that has no curb and gutter. Now, whether or not this could ever lead to something that would actually install curb and gutter through our community, I don't know. That's I think that's a tall order. But you're absolutely right. I think it's a related conversation.
I don't want to create a total rabbit trail, so that's why I don't need answers tonight. But if there's any commentary that doesn't turn into a research project, I'd be interested in it.
It's actually been discussed before, and that's one of the. But obviously it's a big capital investment to do curb and gutter throughout the entire village.
The only problem with, and if you allow me, Bob, the only problem with if we were to do what the mayor refers to as the complete, or what did you say about the program where we come
rake the curb.
Rake the curb, is that majority of the municipalities that have in Hinsdale, and a number of others are getting rid of it because it's costly.
Right.
You can't afford it. And
Right.
that's where we tried, you bag it, we'll pay for it to get rid of. I don't know what the outcome was,
But in that, you're still reliant on somebody actually doing the raking, so if they don't do the raking, it doesn't solve your problem. The only way to truly do it is to have the
I
curb and
guess the thing is,
gutter.
if nobody wants to put elbow grease into it, then they're gonna have to pay for
That's-
it, and
yeah.
then they can't complain if they don't want to, you know, I mean, it's a two-way street at the
Yeah,
end of the day.
I don't want to talk about leaf pickup necessarily
Oh, I'd love to
tonight,
talk
but it's.
Oh, come on, we opened the door, let's go.
I did, because we're talking about a system that we know right now is in trouble.
Yeah.
And we're gonna spend, you know, at $1 million in the first year and then 17% every year thereafter, we're gonna start spending $3 and $4 million additional money in a relatively short order to maintain a system and invest in a system. I would hate to think that we would continue operations that would jeopardize it, or jeopardize at least its annual performance. That seems like a mistake. And then the last thing is, I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of this. It feels a lot in the discussion tonight like this is, you know, kind of almost a wash and trade-off of dollars. And there's this tax decrease for our residents, and there's certainly mathematically that's not something I guess we can argue. But one of the consequences here is that there's going to be a bunch of people paying who haven't before. That's the value of equity, hence the name equity. But let's not lose sight of that. We're talking about, I don't know how many there are in town, 22 churches or 28 churches or something like that. There are going to be at least them plus other NFPs who we've spent a lot of time, you know, stewing about their well-being as an organization, are going to start picking up a bill, and those are ultimately, you know, funded back then by the residents that support those organizations. So, just that doesn't necessarily mean it shouldn't be done, but to not include that in the discussion, I think, would be an oversight. So I just want to keep that in front of us all.
That's right. Although right now, those residents are doing that without their, without being asked. It's being done for them. Their dollars are being taken and applied somewhere else. But going back to the leaf issue, maybe in all seriousness, I think it has been a cost issue, because in order to maintain a system that guarantees pickup of all the leaves from every street, out of every gutter, every storm system is extraordinarily expensive, as Commissioner Durkin pointed out. But your point is well taken, Commissioner Barnett, in the sense that obviously with respect to efforts that are going to go into improving our stormwater system and maintaining it properly, there may be less expensive but equally effective and important ways to make sure that storm sewers, drains stay open, rather than having a fleet of street sweepers. But I assume that, you know, we've worked that into what the recommended level of service would be.
Yep.
Well, maybe we do, I'm sorry, Marilyn,
No, it's
maybe
okay.
we do, like when I was a kid, in Darien, when I was growing up, my parents adopted the fire plug, the fire hydrant in front of our house. You know, we didn't paint it, but we maintained it in the winter, no snow around it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
Maybe
public
we, as
education
people, yeah,
campaigns, things like that,
and
sure.
That's what we do there.
I mean, back when the, what was it, I think the Boy Scouts did the, I forget who it was. I'll probably get yelled at for not picking the right group, but stenciling the storm drains, you know, do not
Oh, yeah,
dump
no,
Junior
drains
Women's,
to river.
Junior Women's Club, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to get yelled at. It's the wrong group.
I'm sorry.
That's okay,
So-
just a comment. I think one of the biggest
Go ahead.
problems with the leaf pickup is the fact that Mother Nature does not do things on a timetable. As I said last week, you know, we had the street sweeper come through our block, beautiful, beautiful, like 4 leaves. And the day after they got done, we have lots and lots of leaves, which we did rake onto the parkways to be mowed, because in our neighborhood, if the storm sewers aren't open, there are problems. So, and I think that's the bottom line is, right now, residents have to take ownership of their block, of their storm sewers, and go out there and clear them. And some people do, and some people don't. But, or you just take your mower out there and mow it. But one way or the other, you've got to keep it clear. And I know Commissioner Newstat has
Took the words
adopted.
right out of my mouth.
And I adopted ours, and as do all my neighbors. I mean, we all take turns, and we all do it, and is it perfect? No. But you do the best you can do. But one of the reasons why the village stopped that kind of leaf service many years back was the fact that if you don't time it just right, they can freeze in the curb or the gutters. They can, I mean, you have all sorts of problems with it, which is why I think when we originally discussed this, we talked about bagging it and the expense associated with that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not quite as simple as just raking it out to the curb and having someone suck it up, you know, because nature doesn't work that way. So,
And speaking of Good Citizen Award and Block Captain of the Year, that's why we were waiting for Commissioner Neustadt to lead up to
I don't have
his
to go
comments.
anywhere. Marilyn took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, I think there was a budget question about how much more does it cost for another rotation of street sweeping?
right.
That might be a small component of the details of the maintenance plan that could be, given to us, so we know if that's part of the
We did get
recommended
that.
level for this kind of
It
program.
is, yep.
I mean, would that even be, the village buys its own fleet of street sweepers again? And then we have them go to segments of town where we know there's an issue.
Anything further on the leaf pickup presentation? I'm sorry, the stormwater utility presentation?
Who's going to rake the leaves of the street?
Okay, they do in Oak Brook. Why don't we then open it up for questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the continuation of the discussion or the exploration of a potential stormwater utility in the Village of Downers Grove. Any questions or comments from the audience? Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
I have one quick one.
Sure.
Did you get enough direction, Dave, for the future meetings,
Yes.
information, questions?
We will get the answers to these questions packaged up with a motion with an actual recommendation for early to mid-November.
Very good, thank you. Well, that wraps up item C. Brings us to, oh yeah, we have something else to talk about, don't we? Item D.
Yes, it's the
Speaking of ongoing conversations.
ongoing conversation about the proposed FY12 budget. In fact, this is the fourth council-level discussion of the proposed FY12 budget. I do want to call everybody's attention to some additional information which we came across this week, and that concerns a question the council's been talking about regarding sidewalk funding. We have some good news. We found out in conversations with the state that the grant that had originally been earmarked only for Ogden Avenue sidewalk program, which would be dedicated towards the hard and soft costs of land acquisition for future sidewalks in Ogden, is now available to us for any sidewalk project anywhere in the village. This means that we could increase the funding for the new sidewalk program as was discussed and keep the funding in FY12 for Ogden Avenue sidewalks. The only impact of doing so would be that in 2013, when we anticipated the second installment of that grant for Ogden Avenue, we would be about $250,000 short on Ogden Avenue in 2013. But in the short run, should the council wish to make that move, that grant money would be available to the Sidewalk Matrix program and/or the Ogden Avenue program. For a little bit of information on timing, the actual public hearing on the proposed budget is scheduled for our next council meeting, Tuesday, November 1st. And we, after that, can continue to talk about the budget, or we could move towards adopting it on November 8th. We're certainly looking forward to any particular direction from the council on changes to the proposed FY12 budget. And with that, Mayor, we can turn it back to you for any questions or comments.
Well, thank you. Well, let's just go back for a moment to the item that you led with. Anyone have any thoughts on that? I mean, that sounds like a very good, sensible approach.
I agree.
I mean, as long as that's on the table, it's fresh in our minds. Anybody have any questions or issues with respect to?
I don't have an
It
issue
makes
with
sense
it.
to me.
It makes sense to me too. I think it makes more sense when you go down the list and realize we can do things like the lighting out in the parking lot of Village Hall, which is actually costing us money every month because the lights can't be maintained, and our wonderful creative employees have somehow pieced them together with bubblegum at times, but be that as it may, that does cost us money. So it makes sense to actually do that particular line item, which we could do by transferring the money from the Ogden Avenue sidewalks, the $250,000 for 2013, into the sidewalk fund and increase the funding. So I don't have a problem with it because it allows us to do, I think, some of the items that staff said really needs to be done also. So we can't forget all of this. It's kind of a big mixture, but I think this gives us some creativity and allows us to do a little bit more of a sidewalk matrix, and that's a good thing.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just say it simply. I'll support the staff recommendation for the increase to the amount of funding allocated for new sidewalk construction. I think it was a great example of how trying to find a remedy for something, and we actually found some more information. Found our staff went and looked for some ideas using council member input, and we came up with a good way to achieve what some council members had proposed. So I appreciate it. I think this is a great recommendation, and I will support it hopefully on November 8th.
Well, it sounds like the direction is to do both. And thanks to Commissioner Barnett for bringing up some different options here. And while we're not exactly doing the ones that were proposed, it certainly inspired a conversation that led to what sounds like a good solution. And it's rare that you can actually do both. I mean, I just like saying that. We can do both. I got chocolate and vanilla. Well, that's probably the only levity we'll have. Now we got to talk about the rest of the budget.
Mayor, before you move on,
Sure.
I'd still like to, and it sounds like maybe the door's already closed here, but I'd still like to have this group consider that light issue, because we're talking about, an estimated annual cost of $3,800, $3,900 as opposed to $200,000 for the sidewalks. And one of our top 12 items, don't forget, is the development of a long-term plan for addressing our facilities. That's one of the things that's supposed to be happening in 2013. So part of my logic of putting that on there, the list for consideration, was not that it wasn't necessary, not that it isn't real, that the maintenance expenses are a pain in the neck. But if we're going to spend 2012 developing a much broader, bigger plan, as we discussed at a couple LRFPs, I'm not sure that $3,800 is something I'm unwilling to risk as a potential maybe cost to do a whole lot more sidewalks. So.
Good question. And when I don't have it without looking it up, when would that work be done? Might we have those conversations before the work is done?
The parking lot lighting or the sidewalk work?
The parking lot lighting.
The parking lot lighting would be done probably in the early to mid part of 2012.
Can I add on to that? Are we having any idea of when we may be getting some grants or information back on grants that we've applied for upgrades to our lighting here at Village Hall?
We have not applied for any grants yet. We plan to do so, and one of the reasons I gave a wide range of when that project would come forward is we think there may be grants out there. We want to fully explore that. So it's probably middle of the year before we're into the parking lot lighting contract.
I mean, if Commissioner Barnett's point, that's something that we might not want to throw money at, it would be better spent on new sidewalk construction.
Commissioner
Because
Newstadt's
it's part of a bigger conversation,
Yeah.
then I'm not opposed to that at all. I just want to make sure we have the bigger conversation and either make a decision one way or the other.
Well, plus Commissioner Newstadt's brought up several times, I think he's referred to Prentice Creek a couple of times in conversations about things, and we're still obviously going to explore that. So it just seems to me like there's no big hurry to do that in light of where we are relative to that top 12 item, relative to the idea of Prentice Creek-ish lights. Let's do some sidewalks in the near future.
Can I throw one more detailed question onto the pile, Dave? I'm sorry. In my professional life as a maintenance mechanic, we had an issue at School District 58 where the actual poles themselves were deteriorating. Are we finding that? I know the information tells us in here that the wiring inside, the ballast, the bulbs, the parts are not available. But recently we had to replace a lot of actual aluminum and or steel poles because they were rusted. That expense is a lot greater than I think what we're talking about here.
We can find out.
Thanks.
And the cycle, again, remind me with respect to, I should know this by heart by now. In terms of the design, the bids, we really find out however much it is that we're going to end up with in new sidewalk construction funds, what that will really translate into in terms of how many linear feet of sidewalk how many segments you can do. The timing on that, again, is
Early spring. We want to make sure we construct during the summer and avoid construction
Right.
during the return to school period.
right. So if everything goes the way it should, we should know sort of whether we're going to come in long or short with respect to whatever the dollars are that we start with in the spring.
Correct.
And we are going to go back to the philosophy that we have at least a segment or two that is already engineered so that the bids come out in favorably. We can then do those also.
Yes, based on this conversation, absolutely. we
Well,
can.
and that's why I asked, because if it turns out that we're a little bit under on one, but we need another, 50 grand to get a whole other segment done, then I think Commissioner Barnett's suggestion is a good one, that we could defer something like that and actually get another segment done, because if we're within reach, but we just need another,
Or we find out the bid comes in for something and we could save $50,000 on something.
right, well, I'm
Yeah.
thinking like hypothetically, if
Yeah.
there was another segment that would cost $100,000, and the bids
Yeah.
come in where we have an extra 50,000 left over, but we're still short 50, and we can dip into a parking lot lighting budget item and get the sidewalk segment done, I think that would be a higher priority.
I think it's just important that we continue the old philosophy of having a segment or two that is
Absolutely.
already engineered and ready to go.
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah, just real quick, more of a question for staff. If we see ourselves, Dave, getting the volume of work that may exceed the ability of one contractor, the village wouldn't have an objection to hiring two or multiple contractors to do sidewalk installation, would we?
No,
Because I don't even know if we even have had a position where we've had to have two contractors.
the limitation isn't so much the construction, the contract firm that would do the construction. The limitation starts to be our ability to properly plan, bundle, and staff for things like neighborhood meetings and project management. So if this is the way the council would like to go and start to put a deferment on the Village Hall parking lot lighting and take all that money towards sidewalks, staff would like the next couple of weeks to really analyze the impact.
Sure.
The same analysis we did on this first 300, look at the next, Mike's looking up the total value of that parking lot lighting project. Whatever that incremental dollar is, do this, about 200,000?
200, I think.
200.
Yeah.
200,000. We'd like to have the ability to do the same analysis we did for this week for that discussion.
Okay. I'd be in favor of that, Mayor.
Sure. Any,
But are we giving the staff the direction then to put that $200,000 into a specific other capital improvement, like sidewalks, or, I mean, I think $200,000 is a fair amount to look at a capital improvement project like sidewalks. If you start talking about roadway reconstruction, it doesn't equate financially.
right.
So, I mean, my opinion would be, we've talked a lot about sidewalks this year, but getting that extra 200 grand back into the sidewalk fund, or sidewalk matrix, you know, that would be where I would like the extra dollars to go, not just kind of hanging out there in a $200,000 purgatory.
I just want to make sure what I'm hearing. We heard earlier that put an additional 300,000 in sidewalk matrix. That was
I
the
think what
shift
they're
we
saying is
reported.
$800,000 would be in sidewalks.
And then now I'm hearing a discussion about deferring the parking lot lighting and putting not only the additional 300 in the matrix, but another 200 in the matrix.
Correct.
For
Right.
2012. Got it.
800 grand.
Got it.
I still would like to, I guess, for 2 weeks, would like to get a better understanding going to what you were saying as far as poles and like, how bad are they? I mean, I know you went into it a little bit, but if we have 2 weeks, if you can come back and, you know, are they gonna last another year? You know, if indeed they're gonna last, and it will only cost, you know, not only, but it'll cost $36,000, and we could do $200,000 more, that's one thing. If, you know, if there's just so much wrong with them that it's gonna, you know, just make it become higher and higher and higher, then I think that's something we need to know and ultimately make that decision. So, or again, if there's grants out there to do the windmills or whatever they are, I think we just need to have the bigger picture before we just, you know, go with the gut and say $800,000. So, you know, I'm not saying it's wrong or right. I'm just saying 6 is fine. One, we need to know if staff can actually do 8. If they can, that's another thing. But if they can, and the lights are falling apart, literally, then that's another thing. So I think we just need to look at we need to take staff's recommendation and look at it in relationship to what we may all want to do, but may not, you know, necessarily be the best thing, so.
Yeah.
And as long as we're spending money, not spending money, but as long as we're looking at things, I think in line with what we were.
Fixing things.
Well, no, it's only, what we were talking about with the stormwater utility and the leaves and everything, if the $16,000, which is what you estimated the cost of another street sweeping is, if we could somehow perhaps see if there, and I could probably find $16,000, if somehow that's realistic to put that in there, again, I think as a backup, if we have another year like this where, you know, the street sweepers came through and then the leaves fell and then you have a big problem, it might be advantageous to be able to do one more sweep, I guess is the term. So from my perspective, if we're going to look at the stormwater issue, then we need to be proactive as far as trying to keep the gutters and everything clean in our neighborhoods. Put your money where your mouth is, I guess, when it
If
comes
I
to
can just comment
stormwater.
on that, I know that last year we ran into this, and I
Right.
talked to Dave about it, and we were able to get it done, and there was adequate monies for additional sweeps.
And I understand that, but if we're going to do it, I think put it in a budget, and then if we don't need it, then we don't use it. We don't have a contingency fund this year, so it'd be nice to actually have things where they're supposed to be, I guess, from my perspective. I don't know if everyone else agrees with that, but since we talked about it, it seems to make some sense.
Okay.
Anyone? Yes, no, maybe so?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
I think we're all asking the same
Okay.
thing in different ways.
okay, that's fine.
Any other questions with respect to the sidewalk part of the budget? All right, then, well, let's just pause for a second. On this particular aspect of the budget discussion, since we may go off into another area, any questions or comments on this from anyone in the audience? Okay. Other budget-related issues. We're not obviously done talking about it tonight, but we're continuing to talk about it. And I appreciate the information, by the way, on the administrative transfers. I had, now, this has only led to more questions, but I'll follow up with you later, because I want to see how that works out in practice and also how it's historically worked out. But that's going to take a lot more in a paragraph. Other questions or comments about the budget, fiscal 2012? Commissioner Waldeck.
Nobody else says something else, I'll continue the conversation for anybody who missed it last time. For the last, pardon? Oh. For the last 2 years, I opposed cuts to the transportation subsidy program, the Meals on Wheels program, and I thought they were a great benefit to the community, and they're part of what made Downers Grove great, at least to me. It contributed to having a complete community, and in the past I demonstrated as having a full apple, a full community, as opposed to a core. So the last week, well, the arguments against restoring the programs, I think, have all been clearly been addressed. I proposed it again, that we fund Meals on Wheels and extend or improve the taxi subsidy program, and I was met with the annual request of show me the money. Where's it going to come from? And the budget, we're talking about budget now. We talked about budget last year. It's a guide, it's a plan, it's a wish list, it's a plan forecast. We've constantly reallocated money, and you can see how the process works here. You can see how it works week after week. We fund projects that were not otherwise completely funded. With few exceptions, we've always come in under budget, with few exceptions. And looking at the budget, we're actually still living in 2011. Revenues were budgeted in 2011 at $40,074,841. Expenses at $40,073,910. Residents came before this council last year, and they requested funding, and were expected to show the line items where the money was to come from. Well, here we are near the end of the 2011 budget year, and the revenue is expected to come in at $41,337,636, or over $1.2 million more than what was originally budgeted. Unfortunately, our expenses exceeded what was budgeted, so that leaves us with a net positive of $937,655, according to staff projections, how we will end the year. So we will be asked in the upcoming weeks to approve a budget amendment for 2011 because we spent more than we budgeted. So we have a legal requirement to consider a budget amendment. So when the residents asked for the funding and the members of the council refused to consider the request by saying, show me the money, well, here's the money. $937,655 according to projections. The positive balance will flow into the general fund for 2012. If the $937,000 is not enough to cover a $60,000 request, one has to ask what more you need. I can point to some other funds that would be available in the 2012 budget if $937,000 is not enough to cover a $60,000 request. Specifically, I would ask that specifically what I'm asking for is that the village restore the transportation subsidy to increase the number of coupons available to $100, which would be a cost of $40,000 as projected by staff. You got that in your materials. and the restoration of the Meals on Wheels program funding to a previous $20,000 level, provided that the Meals on Wheels program be designated for use only for the Meals on Wheels program and designated within Downers Grove. And I believe that between myself, the public, the executive director of the federal agency designated grantee of the federal Meals on Wheels program, namely the DuPage Senior Citizens Council, that all concerns have been met, with the only factor lacking is political will. So let's put aside the red herring, quibbling, silly, and nonsensical arguments. It's not a charity. It's a federal program. It can be designated to stay within Downers Grove, and there is more than enough money already in the 2011 budget and carryover into the 2012 budget. So this is about helping our seniors and disabled neighbors in need. We say we don't want to raise taxes on people because they are hurting, yet some are willing to turn a blind eye to taxpayers who are hurting the most. Why does Downers Grove have to maybe be the only community this time around that is not contributing anything to help the Meals on Wheels program? To me, turning a blind eye to our neighbors in need is ideology, it's an idiocy. Let me close with a couple of quotes. First, our society must make it right and possible for old people not to fear the young or be deserted by them, for the test of a civilization is the way that it cares for its helpless members. And that's from Pearl S. Buck. I happen to like the quote. And in his last speech in 1977, former U.S. Senator Hubert Humphrey remarked in his last speech, "The moral test of government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped." And with that, you can check page in your books to confirm the numbers. C3, General Fund, pages C2 and C3. If you look at 2011 and the budget for 2012, so I think we can easily find $20,000 not only for 2011, but we could extend it into 2012 as well.
I wrote down, I just want to make sure I understand the dollars that you're proposing, Commissioner, for the contribution to DuPage Senior Citizens Council for the Meals on Wheels program. That was $20,000 for fiscal 2012?
Well, since we have to do a budget amendment for 2011, I would ask for $20,000 for the in the 2011, and as part of the carryover into the 2012 budget, which is what happens with this funding, that we moved an additional 20. It's $20,000 in 2011,
okay.
$20,000 in 2012, and since it's a little late to extend the coupons in the taxi program, for the $40,000 that we do that in 2012.
And it was $40,000 for the taxi cab increase, the proposed
Yeah, that
increase
was
in the
based
taxi
on
cab?
staff's
40,000?
projection that if we allow the seniors to pick up an additional $40 in coupons per month. Now, in terms of, we do pay a 50% subsidy, so that extra $40, since the average trip runs about $10, we're talking about an additional 2 trips per month for seniors. Right now, we are subsidizing $60, so we're paying $30, so we're subsidizing, actually paying for about a trip and a half. And I think our seniors need that. And one gentleman alone that I know is trying to live on Social Security. He's getting kidney dialysis. He needs to go 3 times a week. And he's using all the resources he can. He would prefer not to rely on taxi coupons, and he uses the township as best he can. When you get in those types of circumstances, you use whatever resources you can get, including friends, neighbors, relatives, village, and in addition to those medical trips, you got grocery trips. So easily it'll be used for those basically grocery, medical, and pharmaceutical trips. As far as the Meals on Wheels program, all the members of council got the request. Commissioner Schnell asked for a budget request from the paid senior citizens. The Downers Grove portion, the gap is over $142,000. So while we can designate for Meals on Wheels, which is a federal program, while we can designate it that it's going to stay in Downers Grove, the fact that we're only going to contribute $20,000, which is a good contribution, doesn't come anywhere near the, if I recall, the $142,000 gap, which means that other communities that fund their gap plus, or that individuals who give maybe $500 unrestricted to the program are also helping to feed our seniors here in Downers Grove, and I think we need to step up. Tonight we talked about participating in mayors and managers, becoming part of the regional group again, and I think funding for helping our seniors, I think we should show a little participation in that, because we may be the only or maybe one of two local communities that haven't been funding. And I think we should step up, and now I've pointed out the possible funding. And I'll leave it to the rest of you. It's a matter of political will, so thank you.
I just wanted to know what the numbers were because I didn't write them down the first time.
Okay, it's a total
I
of
got
60
it now.
for
I got
next
it.
year.
$60,000. Okay.
20 for this year.
I got it. Well, obviously, I think all my colleagues will have a comment on this. Just a few thoughts, and you've made your request multiple times. You've made it very clearly. I wouldn't characterize the philosophy that underlies the decision that was made to eliminate subsidies or using general tax dollars for certain particular uses, where basically you're taking money from the entire community and then you're directing towards certain areas, and how do you do that and justify picking one group over another and whatnot. I mean, I understand that philosophy. I don't think it's silly, and I think you probably could have avoided that comment, because I think everyone takes this issue very seriously, and there are differences of opinion about it. And I think that the differences of opinion on this dais reflect differences of opinion in the community on this topic. So I would not characterize it as silly at all. I understand the philosophy as to, particularly in the recent times, seeking to avoid anything that is a subsidy or taking general tax dollars and channeling them in one to one particular special interest. I understand that. On the other hand, I also understand the call that you've made very passionately to contribute to these special interests. I also hear that, and I think we've all heard that in the community. We heard it at the budget meeting we had, the Coffee with the Council budget focus on Saturday. There were people that came and basically asked us to do exactly what you're saying. I get that too. But there's two things that I personally struggle with, and one is it's the need to understand and to quantify what we get. I think Mr. LeCren said earlier tonight in a comment directed at something else, is what's the return on investment? What is that we get from the investment? And obviously you've identified some of those, but I think that has to be more quantifiable in terms of the entire community, of what the community gets from this, as opposed to what a particular group gets from this. And then how we pick and choose amongst groups. And I'm not saying I'm making a judgment one way or the other. That's just one of the things that, from an analytical standpoint, I need to get my head wrapped around. And the other thought that I have is that we have these two competing interests. One, the philosophy, which again I don't think is silly at all. I think it's perfectly understandable and rational. But I also understand the passionate call to contribute that you've made. I understand both those things. What I've struggled with is I think that there is a way to navigate. What was the phrase earlier tonight? To do both. I think there may be a way to do both that addresses some of the concerns that I think are not silly at all, but I think are valid concerns about subsidies and using tax dollars for special interests. And on the other hand, being compassionate and finding a way to enhance your community and those who live within it. I confess I haven't figured out the details of that yet, but I'm sure going to try to continue thinking about it, and maybe we'll get to a point where there is some other way than what has gone before where this can be done. So I don't have an answer, Commissioner. Those are just some observations that I make, and I will commit to this. I will commit to continuing to think about ways to navigate those competing interests to perhaps come up with a third one where we can in some way do both. I don't know what it is yet, but I think through creativity, innovation, cooperation, collaboration, communication, we just might come up with one. I don't know if I'm going to do it today. I don't know if I'm going to do it by the time we vote on this budget. But this is also an issue that I think is going to come back every single year. And so I'll continue to think long and hard about it. And I would hope that if we do come up with some innovative solutions or proposals, that everybody at least consider them, even if they aren't necessarily completely 100% acceptable. That's really all I have. I don't have a position one way or the other than those observations at this point in time. And hopefully that just sets the table for what I'm sure will be comments and observations by my colleagues. So whoever else would like to weigh in, Commissioner Waldak's proposal. Commissioner Rankin.
In preparing for today's meeting, I was just doing a little research. And I guess I needed to know which communities are donating to DuPage Senior Citizens Council. Because when I went on their website, I saw 7. And Bill, you're saying that everyone's doing it but us, so.
You said 2.
No, I said 2 that were not.
2 that were not doing it, correct.
Addison and us were contributing nothing, and Addison is looking to contribute this time around. So I understand that's not official, but
Okay.
I know what we've been contributing, and there was a list last year of maybe 20 communities. Some in the economic downturn actually increased their funding contributions.
And it's not that I'm a fan of doing what everyone else is doing, it's just understanding, I guess, what's going on in other communities. Because when I looked on their website, it lists their different donors, and it has 7 communities in DuPage County listed, and there's 39. So maybe they just don't have their website updated, I'm not sure. And then I do agree with what Mayor Tully is saying, is that I think there are taxpayers in our town who want us to be conservative with their money. And so I think we need to be very careful with this. And I think the other question I had was, I think that was it, actually.
Well, if the question was being conservative or careful, you got the funding request from the executive director today. Seniors contribute over $34,500, 13%. State and federal, $120,000. The cost gap, this is all within Downers Grove. The cost gap in Downers Grove is $118,610, or 43%. And what we're asking, or what I'm asking for, is that out of $937,000 that we can come up with 20. We just heard about, let's just do $16,000 for leaves, let's do another sweep around, as if it's nothing, but it seems like when we're talking about this program, all of a sudden we're talking about blood money.
No, I don't think that's the case, Commissioner.
Well, we seem to spend more time on this, and then we say 16,000 here and 10,000 there.
I don't think it's the dollar amount. Basically, you've answered the question that was posed to you.
And so, well, the question has always been, is it a charity? The answer is no. Everybody also got in their packet tonight, in their answers, a congressional explanation of Title III. 3C. You can go online. That's a very good presentation. It explains a lot, but if you actually go in and read the law that goes back to 1965, it also describes the responsibilities and duties of the agent. And so, it's nice to say let's not give money to a charity. We aren't. Meals on Wheels would be the program, the designated program. It happens to go to an agency, and my gosh, would we rather have a federal government issuing millions of dollars for a program, and now we need to hire, because government shouldn't contribute to a charity, why don't we just hire federal workers to go out and do this? Which would cost how much more? The most complete and inexpensive and efficient way of doing this, I think, is the way they are currently doing it, is designating agencies that actually apply for these grants. There's different agencies in different counties and different states. Somebody's got to distribute this, and how you put the money, put the money on the ground and get the work done. You try and do that as efficiently as possible, and I think that's what this group is trying to do. So it's an efficient way. We can designate it. It's not a 501c3 charity, which is one of the things that comes up time and time again. And I addressed that issue. I found the funding issue. I found that we could designate the money. Those are the issues that have come up time and time again, and I've answered those questions. Now, what we're talking somewhere, I'm trying to find, I think it's 22,600 meals to 235 unduplicated seniors. I saw, here we are, 19,450 well-being checks. If that doesn't contribute in some way, shape, or form to what we call core services, what our police and fire are often called to do, these people are trained to do, and it saves lives. So, we put up sidewalks and we do all these other great things, and it's wonderful, but we're talking about well-being checks and the actual saving of lives. We put a lot of money in a fire department, and we should, but how many structure fires are there? Now, if you look at the numbers, it doesn't make sense. Oh, there's 3, 4 structure fires, and maybe 6. I don't know what we're on a track for this year. Look at the money we spend versus the numbers. Okay, what I'm saying is you have 19,460 well-being checks in a year. Certainly worthwhile for 20,000, and we know that the cost is considerably more.
No one's discounting this, Commissioner.
Well, that's where the money's going, and I hope it answered your question.
That's fine, and no one's suggesting that DuPage Senior Citizens Council doesn't do great work or that it's not a worthy program. And I think I heard a statistic today, something about the fire service, where we spend municipalities spend the most money on fire protection, yet most of the operations have nothing to do with it. Most of it's more of a medical
paramedics.
Yet no one's suggesting that we sell our fire trucks and get rid of our fire stations.
Certainly not.
So there's always different issues like that. Yeah, I think more. And again, I don't want to start anticipating what other people are going to say. I think you're doing a little bit of that based on prior history. Some of the things you've addressed haven't even been raised yet. I think, but what you've clearly pointed out is what I think the crux of it is. It's a matter of if different people view different things in different ways. I mean, this discussion is a reflection of difference of opinion in the community. And I don't think just because people disagree on this topic that means any one person is more or less moral than another one. Or that one person's argument is silly and another person's argument is righteous. I think that's just an inappropriate comparison.
Well, we also
and all we're doing right now is talking about it. You've made a specific proposal. I've yet to hear from, other than myself and Commissioner Rankin, no one else even had an opportunity to speak yet. So I would ask that perhaps you let them have even a fraction of the time you spent speaking on it. And
all
then,
the time they want.
Well, okay, then let's give them an opportunity.
Thank you.
But I mean, there are other organizations that could make the same argument on behalf of DuPage Senior Citizen Council just as passionately. There was an event here in town for Family Shelter Services. I'm sure they could make the same argument about saving lives and enhancing our community. And I think that's why I understand the dilemma here, is that who chooses? We do. And that's why I think people are taking this issue very seriously. You've passionately made your plea for the choices that you've made. And so all I'm observing, I'm just making some observations. The guy here's thinking about, is there some way we can make everybody happy? Maybe that's a foolish folly on my behalf.
Well, there's $937,000. So.
Well, I don't think it's an issue of, could we add another $60,000 under the budget? Sure we could. I don't think that's the issue. So let's hear what some of the other colleagues have to say. I know Commissioner Durkin's been waiting very patiently.
Yeah, mine's real quick. for the manager is, and I know I read it in the book that Bill referenced, is that an actual number? I mean, is that correct, that there's going to be 937 surplus?
That is our estimate of how 2011 revenues and expenses will come in. If they hold true to our estimates, and we have no reason to believe they won't at this point in the year, then we would be adding $937,000 to the general fund balance.
And just to bring that into layman's terms, that's sort of like when you're owed a refund on your taxes, and you can either have it paid to you and have it refunded, or you can apply it towards your payments for next year, and that's basically what we've done. We've taken that, carried it over, and it's part of our fiscal 2012 budget.
Yes,
It's not like we just have we have $1 million laying around somewhere.
No, what it does is it's the starting point for the fund balance for FY
Right.
2012.
Commissioner Waldek's point, though, is it's there, it's real money, and
Yes,
right
it
now
is.
we're applying it to next year's expenses, if you will.
We're
But-
applying it to the starting fund balance. In fact, the revenues for 2012 are proposed to be equal to the expenses for 2012. So we'd start the year
Yes.
higher and end the year higher.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, understood. And so he's proposing that there's that source of funds that, yes, $60,000 could be diverted from it.
Yes.
I understand. Anything else, Commissioner?
No, just a thought that I had with Commissioner Waldeck at the last meeting. I think you'd be better off if you would have come and look at us funding this at year end versus, let's say, in this budget process, when this number would actually be there, a certain percentage of that going towards this Meals on Wheels versus making it a budget talk. That's just my own opinion.
In a sense, is that not
Well,
what I'm
if you
doing?
went
When we
to
talk
Davis-
about the 2011
So
budget
2011,
amendment,
what's the rollover, okay? Then say, you know what, that we
That's it.
That's kind of what he's saying.
that is it.
do a percentage. We talked about that. Because these numbers that you're recommending for funding, this is your opinion. This is what Bill Waldeck thinks we should do. If you did a funding, if you did a percentage of whatever percent of whatever is left over, that's going to be rolled into the 2012 or the 2013 or the 14 or the 15, 15% of whatever is left over. In this case, $937,000 is what we could then provide to these organizations that you're saying you'd like us to do. Or the revenue that we would be able to get if we're successful in collecting the lost monies for water usage on putting out fires from insurance companies. Creativity.
Certainly.
Well,
And then back on this funding thing that you're talking, or this, what do you call it here, the well-being checks of $19,450. Well, they serve 22,600 meals, so that's 22,600 people they're going to see, right? Or did I read this wrong? So to me, it's just, there's a difference of 3,400 that they're not going to check on, right?
I would think every time they delivered a meal, they were
It's
checking on
considered a
somebody.
check-in, yeah.
I would imagine so.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you, Mayor. I know.
Okay, well, I mean, it's not just a comment there. I think Commissioner Durkin actually pointed out, one of the issues I understand it is, and I've heard this, we've all heard this, is that some people object to the concept of their tax dollars being taken and then somebody else decides where they are directed. You've made your choice. Other people might make different choices, and they're being deprived of that choice. That's just a philosophy. Some people agree with it. Some people don't agree with it. But again, I understand it. I think Commissioner Durkin was hitting upon a concept where if there was some revenue source that was not of that nature, maybe that would entail a different conversation. I don't know. We haven't actually had a proposal. I mean, that's thinking with your mind open. Commissioner Barnett, I know you have nothing to say on this topic.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to quantify the money a little bit. You know, $937,000 is not left over. $937,000 is a function of 2 years' worth of $500,000 property increases. We increased this body, but for a couple of us, chose to increase property taxes $1 million over the last 2 years with a lot of angst about what that would do to folks. And it undoubtedly has a negative effect on people. It's not like there was accidentally $1 million left over from some big influx of economic benefit. We took that, I think Mayor used the term or something similar to the word confiscate when you were talking about stormwater utility. We're taking that money and using it. that's where this money came from. So it is, certainly it's there. I'm wondering if folks would prefer we gave it back to them as opposed to choosing one discrete segment of the population to receive it. At the risk of sounding silly or nonsensical or throwing out red herrings, you know, when those quotes are thrown out there, they're certainly heartfelt and I think cause for serious reflection, which brings me to the same question that the mayor's asked a couple times, and we've asked at least two budget cycles in a row now. Why this group and not another? And that's where a big part of my problem lies. We know we have needs all over town, and I'm not sure why one group, in this case seniors that have meal challenges or are homebound, are somehow more deserving of a redistribution of tax dollars than our battered women, than our youth, than our homeless, than are those that are in their homes just barely and dying for their fish drop-off that they go pick up each week. That's where part of the problem lies, or the problem has lied for me. Now, I know the mayor would like me to not reopen old wounds, but one of the discussions we had in the past that didn't go very far with this group, so be it, but was that, you know, we ought to be, if these needs are there, which they are, certainly, and if these organizations, DSCC included, do good work, which they absolutely do, that we ought to be, I was suggesting that we ought to be trying to find some method by which we systematically and consistently and fairly have a process by which we evaluate who ought to get what and how much. That was not well received, which is fine. But to suggest that this group is unique in that they have a need, maybe that's not what's being suggested, but I really have a problem with that because there are needs all over, way beyond our means. And that $1 million is only here because all of our residents kicked it in. It's also something that shouldn't get lost, that we kind of punted it in our last LRFP, but that 937 is like less than 1/3 of sort of the known operational deficit relative to maintaining the existing assets that we're, you know, trustees over, that we're supposed to be good stewards of. Now, we punted that for the benefit of trying to get through this budget. We punted it because we think stormwater utility may play a role in that. But we have a known, right this very second, $3 million+ gap in maintaining the existing assets of this village for 2013. You know, maybe it ought to be $3,060,000. I suppose we can talk about that, but it's not. I don't think it's an appropriate characterization to suggest that there's $937,000 extra dollars laying around that just happen to be there and we don't have a need for. So I don't support this change because I think that we appropriately focused on the activities that we ought to be involved in. I would still support some revisiting of trying to develop a method by which we would evaluate this, but to have one group ask and one not and therefore think we're doing right by our community is wrong by me. So I'm not discounting the need nor the DSCC, but I don't think that certainly this method or this approach is the right one to try and be helpful.
Just put the finger on it again. It really seems to keep coming back to two issues. One is the source of the funds, and that raises some challenges and some distress for folks. And the other one is the allocation. And again, I don't have the magic answer today, but I think there's a way to navigate those two issues in a way that I think could possibly achieve or garner majority support, not just this council, but also this community. But I don't have that answer today, but I'm hearing bits and pieces of something that could potentially come together in the future. Commissioner Schnell.
I said this last year and the year before, but I'll say it again, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. But from my perspective, what sets a program such as Meals on Wheels apart from FISH or Family Shelter Services or any other good charity within this community is the fact that, one, it is already a federally subsidized program. It's not a charity. It's a federally subsidized program that has federal funds and state funds associated with it. And I know we up here differ on that particular issue, and that some people view it as a charity. I happen to view it as a program that for a good 10 years, the Village of Downers Grove actually helped to contribute for our seniors. I understand there's a difference of opinion up here. I've done this for 2 years. I think it's a worthwhile program. I know it's not going to go anywhere, and I don't want to be argumentative. It's just I wanted to say basically that I think it's very different from Family Shelter Services, which is a great program and something that individually we can contribute to and make a difference in that way. You can individually contribute to Meals on Wheels too if you want to. Bottom line is that there are a lot of municipalities within DuPage County that help to subsidize it for their residents, as does the federal government, as does the state of Illinois. So I think that makes it unique. The one issue that Commissioner Waldeck has brought up that I guess, I don't want to say I take issue with, but I have more concerns about is the taxi subsidy program for a couple of reasons. One, we have not, at least to my recollection, seen a report this year as to, and I don't want to make more work for you, but I haven't seen a report that basically says how many coupons have been sold, how many have been redeemed, because in the past, there seemed to be a difference between redemption and purchase, and whether or not that's telling or not, I'm not quite sure, but in the future, perhaps, as we do the budget document, if we could get that kind of information, I think that may be helpful, because my belief is that this is probably going to come up each year. One of the things that I thought was very telling on Saturday's meeting was the fact that we had 13 or 14 senior citizens there, and yes, that they would all like more. But I think they were very appreciative of the fact that unlike a lot of communities that have cut these programs out totally, we have not done that. And I think one woman said that exactly, is, we appreciate the fact that you've at least left something there for us, and that it allows us to get, to do things. I think perhaps and just again, listening to them, to the seniors, perhaps, they go shopping, they go to doctors, and obviously you can't group doctor's appointments, but you could group shopping, you could group a lot of things, and perhaps with some creativity, as the mayor said, and I think as some of my colleagues may speak to, if we can somehow come up with some creativity about how trying to get people from point A to point B collectively, then perhaps there's a way of stretching things more. And I don't know how that will work, and it may take a year or more to work some of that out, but I think if we can channel some of our energies into that may be productive. So I still think we should put something towards Meals on Wheels. I'm a realist enough to know that we're not going to do that, and that's this collective body right. The only reason I think
it's not November yet.
Well, I know it isn't, but I can read numbers. But I also think that just saying it's a charity is not really true. It's much more than a charity. It's something that's subsidized by the federal government in the state of Illinois. So anyway, be that as it may, if somehow, if it's not a lot of work, if we could get those numbers on the taxi coupon program, I think that would be helpful too. So.
Well, and just on that point, and I don't want the conversation, because Commissioner Wallach did make two proposals and don't want one to overshadow the other, and I'm glad you brought the conversation back to the taxi cab subsidy, because we are continuing that program.
Correct.
That program is not eliminated. So this body has previously and continues to view that as something, that's in the budget now, but what Commissioner Waldeck is suggesting is increasing the amount. So this body and this community have decided that is something that it wishes to continue to do. So the question is whether there should be more funding involved. Whether it's 40 or something else, again, I haven't closed, contrary to what you might be reading, I haven't closed my mind on any of this stuff yet. But that is a different question, and I know no one's really spoken to that other than Commissioner Schnell so far. Are there any thoughts on that? Because I think Commissioner Waldeck had a specific dollar amount for taxi cab subsidy, whether it's 40 or what it is now, or 5 or something else. Are there any thoughts on that topic? Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. I support the proposed budget that includes the amount for the taxi cab subsidy. I think when the folks came on Saturday, they thought that we were going to cut even more out of the taxi cab subsidy. And once that was cleared up, I think they understood and appreciated that we were, as Commissioner Schnell said, leaving that subsidy in place. You know, it's an important part of our society, but I think that as we move forward, it's important that other agencies, other people try to step up to help fill that void. You know, there's a lot of options out there. Just today, I kind of did an anecdotal drive around town and found a lot of buses sitting around during the day. C-Spar's got some, a couple of churches have them, high schools, there's buses all over town. And I think, you know, individually we can try to use our networks and our connections to round up the troops to see if there's any interest in some shared rides. You know, shared rides to Jewel, Dominic's, downtown Downers Grove, trying to get people where they want to go from idle buses. I think that might be a good idea. I think that's something that individually we have to consider in our own time. I don't know that that's the role for our village to be there doing that, but certainly looking into that is something that I would work on. But as far as this proposal goes with the taxi cab subsidy, I'm in favor of the proposed budget amendment, or budget proposal, excuse me. And I do have some comments about the other proposal, Mayor, when you're
Go
ready.
ahead. Please.
You know, we often talk about hearing from residents, and I think up until last Saturday when we heard from one resident at our coffee with the council, and then today we got a letter from DuPage Senior Citizens Council. I haven't heard, I won't speak for the rest of my colleagues, but I haven't heard from many people, or actually any people in town, about the Meals on Wheels reduction in service. We did hear about from folks at budget time last year. They came out, they told us what they thought. We told them what we were doing the cuts for and the reductions for, and I think they understood it. This year, I do appreciate Commissioner Waldek's finding funds. I will look to staff to see what that will have as effects going forward on our budgeting for 2012 and beyond. But I do hear from residents about potholes almost every day. I do hear from residents about speeders almost every day. I do hear from residents that, boy, that night at the firehouse was a great event. I didn't know that firefighters do so much during the day. I hear almost daily from folks saying, thanks for patching my road, but here's another road that's in horrible condition. I think it's incumbent upon us to try to prioritize what we hear from residents, how we hear it, when we hear it, and the frequency of what we hear to come up with how we should spend the sacred tax dollars that we generate. One of the things I don't appreciate up here is when I hear words like idiocy, silly, and blood money. Those words are inflammatory and just darn right not nice. So I'll look to staff to find information about Commissioner Waldek's proposal. I think we need more information before we make a choice. I'll tell everyone here tonight that I think we made the right choices in years past about this issue. I think we can all individually use our own networks and resources to help all the charities that come to us and come before this village. And any group, any organization that's looking for money is very valuable to our community, to our residents. We have a means of expressing events, fundraisers, activities that these groups may have, and I think we can all do a better job at trying to let our residents know what's out there. So tonight I will weigh in on the taxi cab program. I'm not in favor of that increase. I'm in favor of the proposed budget there, and I will look to staff for more information on the other funding option for the Meals on Wheels program. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments or thoughts on any of the two proposals Commissioner Waldek's made? Commissioner Waldek, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Regarding the taxi subsidy
And then
program.
I'm sorry, and then I will ask if the audience has any comments. Go ahead.
Okay. Study was a couple of years ago, based on 100 coupon availability. We were providing, or not we were providing, there were over 1,400 rides provided in a single month. That's the kind of need that's out there, and that doesn't include the unmet need. How many of you can do all your medical trips, all your grocery shopping, your pharmaceuticals, all your trips? How many of you can do that 3 times a month? So if you're looking for a need, and then Fish certainly provides rides. You call them up, and the seniors are very frustrated because they appreciate the rides that are offered by the Fish group. They offered 30 rides. That doesn't come anywhere near the 1,400 that were provided, and still there were more necessary. As far as grouping rides, you're talking seniors. Not everybody wants to shop the same place in the same day, the same time. If you talk to the seniors, a lot of them from one place tend to, if you look at the trip sheets, you'll see they tend to go to one grocery store in particular, and they would rather shop somewhere else, but it costs more to go somewhere else. They don't have a choice because it's either transportation or pay the additional cost in groceries. You have buses laying around, okay, let's see, there's the Ride to Page program. They schedule rides, they group as many rides as possible with the equipment that they have. The more people who sign up for that particular program, the more sponsors they have, the more grouping of rides, the better efficiency you have. But right now, considering what we're doing and what's available and so forth, the taxi subsidy program is actually the most cost-effective way of handling things. It's the administrative costs are rather low. You don't need a call center. You don't need all kinds of coordination. So the cost is, we're getting a lot of bang for the buck out of that. But to say that we need buses, on voting day, I happen to know that a number of the seniors, rather than take cabs, they walked to the bus stop, and it was several blocks to the bus stop and several blocks to come here to the Village Hall to vote, and they took a bus back. It's a day trip for them. There's just a lot of need out there. The idea that, oh, there's a lot of charities out there. We pointed out the fact that numerous times it isn't a charity. So if you have a ideological problem funding a charity, this isn't a charity. And I don't think, a lot of the emails we got when we talked about this last year had to do with, I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to a charity. It's not a charity. You guys up here challenged me. Did want to give money to a charity? Okay, it isn't a charity. You said I would have voted for it if it could be designated to stay within town. Provided that. So and if you find the money, 3 for 3. So this is just an effort that council keeps throwing up additional roadblocks, and I spoke about political will. There's absolutely no political will up here from what I see. And it's a shame. But to throw up roadblocks and come up with excuses that are consistently answered and then throw up more just shows lack of concern, lack of will. And I would ask you all to reconsider. I'm not asking for $937,000, and Commissioner Barnett wants to return some or all of it to the taxpayers and in their property taxes. I haven't heard that proposal. Should have brought that proposal up before. Talk about sidewalks. We've been shuffling money around. You challenged me to find money. I found money. You want $13,000? We can change one sales tax rebate. We sit there and we give money in a tax rebate to a single business that competes with other businesses. $13,000, and you can check the sheet from last week. We give them. We wanted a particular type of business. We didn't get that. We give them $13,000. That's a business. How many businesses are there? So we sit there and quibble over giving money. Oh, well, we can't give it to this charity. Or can't give it to this group because it looks like a charity even though it isn't a charity. And we quibble over that. But when it comes to business, oh, boom, $13,000, sure. Out of all the businesses we have, we pick and choose. Different set of rules, I guess.
All right, thank you,
and it gives me pause. Thank you.
No, I understand it, but There are many things that I think it's gone a little too far. We're having a polite, civilized conversation, and number one, to suggest that somebody reconsider a decision that hasn't yet been made, I think is premature. And number two, I really don't appreciate the borderline suggestion that somehow others are of lesser moral character or fiber than others. That really isn't very productive.
Nothing borderline about it.
And please, trying to shame people into a vote is not going to get anywhere. And we need to stick to responsible, civilized discussion and debate. You have made an impassioned plea. Your points have been well made, well articulated, but then it goes too far. I do not respond well to someone who tries to shame me into a vote by basically suggesting that my moral fiber and character is less than someone else's.
I don't recall saying that. I don't recall saying that, Mayor.
You pretty much did. I sat here very carefully and listened to it. That I could do without. And I would also apply that same suggestion to everyone else, but that's just not going to cut it. Commissioner Durkin.
I have no comment, Mayor.
I mean, you undermine your arguments when you do that. Really, I'm giving you some advice. You are far more effective when you stick to the points and the facts and then trying to impugn the worthiness of a human being for not following in your footsteps.
I fail to understand that, Mayor.
I'm telling you, I think there's six people around you right now that all feel that way. And if I'm wrong, then somebody correct me.
When I was challenged, I was put up with roadblocks and questions.
I haven't challenged
answered those
anything.
questions.
I haven't challenged it. I didn't ask a question. I didn't even use the word charity.
It has
and I've been
used.
lectured for the last 15 minutes. That I don't think is productive.
It has been used.
Maybe, well, okay, but not here and not in this discussion.
Previous questions. I'm answering
I'm not going
previous
back
questions.
2 years ago. We're having a conversation about this budget for fiscal 12. We need to move on because we have another $131 million that we need to talk about.
Certainly.
Are there any questions or comments in this audience with respect to either of these proposals? All right. Back to the council. Are there any questions or comments on any of the other $131 million issues that we have on the table?
I don't have anything about 100 million. I do have a question on some of the information you gave us. You were talking about domestic violence calls, and there seems to be a drop in them, according to, which seems in this economy and everything else seems strange. If we could just, I don't want to say double check the numbers, but in time maybe, not during budget, but perhaps we could get a better understanding of that.
I think that's just because that's a year-to-date number and it hasn't gone up through the whole year. I think
Okay, so this is not, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that could be it. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. It just seems strange.
I think it's tracking pretty close to the historical averages.
Okay, thank you.
Any other direction, to the extent that you need any direction tonight?
We have enough direction to answer the questions asked tonight and to prepare the changes to the sidewalk budget and to get further action on and research on the street light or the parking lot light. So we have our homework. We'll be ready in 2 weeks.
Street sweeping.
And street sweeping's on the list too. So, we have good direction tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, and we have a couple items that we can think about between now and when we have to act upon these items. They've been very, I think, squarely and passionately put on the table.
And that ends tonight's first reading, Mayor.
Thank you. That brings us to item 9, Mayor's Report. And a couple things that I want to talk about. First of all is the ComEd update that we are going to do every meeting. And I suspect we'll probably be doing it every meeting for a long time. The update with respect to, and again, for those who have obviously been following this issue, we held a town hall meeting on September 15th. It was focused upon reliability of electrical service in the village of Downers Grove from our provider, Commonwealth Edison. And as further follow-up, staff continues to work with Commonwealth Edison to ensure that residents are made aware of when ComEd is performing tree trimming in their neighborhoods. This is one of the steps that ComEd talked about at the meeting, and it was part of their plan of action afterwards. Our understanding is that ComEd representatives are walking circuits identified in the village's reliability report that we had issued prior to the September 15th town hall meeting, and it was discussed at that meeting. ComEd representatives are walking the circuits identified in that report to identify trees that need to be trimmed. Targeted tree trimming in those areas has not yet begun. It is ComEd's practice to use a postcard mailing to notify customers of when their trees will be trimmed, so look for those. The village has also asked ComEd to provide us with a list of all the areas that have already been reviewed by ComEd employees walking the circuits, as well as a list of those that remain to be reviewed by ComEd, so that we can keep an eye on that and also be of assistance in informing residents as to what they can expect and when. But this isn't all just about tree trimming. The village also continues to track the other items that were identified in the reliability report that the village put together and discussed at the town hall meeting on September 15th. There have been no other changes as of yet to the anticipated completion dates for the tree trimming and equipment repairs that are outlined in that report. We will be following up on that, and we also have some residents that took us up on our request that if they either have not heard from ComEd and gave their name and address at the meeting, or are not happy with what the response was, we are collecting those inquiries or comments from our residents and doing our best as a village to weigh in on their behalf with the representatives of ComEd. Getting back to tree trimming very quickly, the tree trimming is anticipated by the end of March of next year, and the equipment upgrades are anticipated to be complete by the summer of next year. So that remains to be the timetable for both the tree trimming and the equipment upgrades, and we will stay on top of that, but that's the current status. The other item that I want to discuss, and I'll try to do it as briefly as I can, understand the hour is late, but these issues are of significance importance to all municipalities, and Downers Grove in particular, because they potentially bear upon our revenues and our expenses to a very large degree, a very significant degree. When Mayor Craig was here earlier today with Mr. Beloga, we had mentioned on a couple of occasions that there was a meeting, quarterly business meeting of the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus, which is a meeting of mayors of the city of Chicago and the Chicago metropolitan area that takes place on a quarterly basis. Truly a great opportunity to network and communicate and work as a much larger group and much larger voice on issues that impact and are of great importance to all municipalities. Some of the things that were on the agenda today that that body will be taking action on, both as a body and also through its component parts, those being the mayors and the municipalities that make up the organization, are as follows. The 2011 veto session that is coming up in Springfield has a number of items that could be very significant to us. One is something we've heard about before, and that's the possibility of pension reform. The focus right now appears to be on legislation that would affect only the state employees and not affect police or fire pension funds. The view of the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus is that there is a larger solution that needs to be enacted, and if something goes forward now that only addresses the state employees, it may be a long time, if ever, again, that there's an opportunity to achieve a more comprehensive global solution on a going forward basis, not affecting benefits that are being paid to those who have already been receiving them, but on a going forward basis. And that the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus's position is that it would be better not to call a bill on pension reform at all right now if it's only going to be a partial one. But it would be rather better to wait until the next general session and try to address all the pension issues at once for some true prospective comprehensive reform. So that's one issue. The next one is the potential changes to the personal property replacement tax, or actually that issue. The PPRT, on the one hand, if it were to go into effect, this is the issue that basically is the scheme for funding the payment of salaries to regional superintendents. It was originally in the budget, and then it was taken out, and now it's being categorized as a local issue that should come out of local taxes rather than from the state. While this would only have an $11 to $14 million impact out of billions of dollars, the concern is that this is more bad precedent, that it's more nickel and diming, and then there'll be a drib here and a drab there, and all of this is eating away at revenues that come to municipalities, and the nice balanced budget that we're talking about for fiscal year 2012 suddenly is out of balance, and now we're going back to figuring out, we don't have that 937 anymore. Now we're scrambling or looking at other ways to continue to do what we need to do on a daily basis for our residents. And that all these attempts, even though they may appear not to be that big in dollars, have to be fought vigorously because they are just more attempts to balance the state's budget problems on the backs of municipalities. All of these issues are obviously ones that the caucus is asking for both residents and municipalities to speak out on to their representatives in Springfield so that we make sure that municipal issues are properly taken care of. Another important issue was sales tax sourcing. This is not coming up in the veto session, but is something that the caucus is rightfully so decided they need to get out in front of. There are different views on this issue depending on what municipality you are in. And this is the concept that Downers Grove could attract some business to open up a kiosk in Downers Grove, and somehow all their sales, even though they took place in Palatine, we would get the credit for. And this is another issue that has, it's wrought with danger in terms of understanding what your revenues are going to be long-term, having them being more predictable and reliable, and giving the ability to budget. So that issue may not be coming up in the veto session, but it is out there. Speaking of ComEd, the other topic that was discussed today was where things stand with respect to the smart grid legislation. The Northwest Municipal Conference just issued today a white paper that goes into great detail about this topic from a municipal perspective, and we obviously didn't have time to get it and review it before today, but it includes a proposed resolution, which is in the same vein as the one that this council adopted previously, but it goes into some more details as to why the smart grid legislation, which was vetoed by Governor Quinn, the attempt to override that veto should not be permitted and should be opposed, because not that there's an objection to smart grid itself, but I think as we previously discussed in the resolution that this body passed, there needs to be more accountability and more enforceability with respect to it. And those issues are spelled out, and obviously they would like to have a resolution passed as quickly as possible. We obviously couldn't do that tonight. We're not meeting next week, so what I've asked the manager to do is to get that information to the council, and if everyone is in agreement, I could write a letter on behalf of the council in support of the resolution, but I think we have to take a look at it first. But the way it was described, I think it's consistent with the approach and the position that we've previously taken on that legislation. The last thing I just want to mention real quickly is, surprisingly or not, the City of Chicago's proposed water rate increase was also a topic that came up on the agenda very late, because that was something that was only announced very recently. I won't repeat what Mayor Craig said in response to Commissioner Durkin's comments, but in short, the caucus is putting together a subcommittee, and it will be made up by those who are directly impacted by the proposed rate increases, those who are members of the DuPage Water Commission, for example, and really drill down with the mayor's office, Mayor Emanuel's office, as to what is happening, what is the reasoning behind this, what is the impact, and after that fact-finding, which is what Mayor Craig referred to, then there will be the strategy as to what's our position, what can we do in terms of possibly pushing back or eliminating or reducing the impact that might have on Downers Grove and other municipal organizations in the suburbs. So those are some good points that were discussed today. I wanted to share with everyone, because I think it's not just this council needs to be aware of it, but also I think our residents need to be aware of what's going on in Springfield, and give them the opportunity to raise their voices in support or against as they may see the case. Last, there is a task force that was formed by Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, which I will share with everyone when I get a chance to scan this and send it to you, which is a study with respect to an issue that is near and dear to our hearts, and that's consolidation with respect to services and shared services. A number of different organizations have looked at, it's called a service delivery task force, and they basically looked at the need for shared services, consolidations, and cooperations amongst taxing bodies, because everybody understands that that is the only true way of reducing costs, and it is the wave of the future. If that's the wave of the future, then Downers Grove is already in that future, because with things like the combination of our 911 call center with Westmont, we're already doing some of these things. But I think you'll find it interesting to see what some other of our peers are looking at doing, some of the challenges that are in place, and some of the work that's being done here. And to the extent that we get involved with Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, they've been nice to invite me to the meetings, although we're not participating officially right now. We can see some of the things that we get when you participate in organizations like this. What you get is you get the benefit of other people's thoughts and thinking, cooperation and collaboration that's kind of hard to do in isolation. It's some really good stuff, and I would encourage everyone to take a look at it, and we can see maybe there's some opportunities here. I know that we have our list of priorities for the next year, but I think identifying opportunities for collaboration, cooperation, consolidation should always be high priorities, because that's where the real savings comes in, as I know this council knows. So I apologize for the length of that report, but I truly thought it was important to share those things with each of you because these are all major issues that could potentially have big impacts upon this organization's day-to-day business and ability to fund it. And with that, I will conclude my report and ask for the manager's report. Item 10.
No report tonight, Mayor.
Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. The only item I have to present tonight is an ordinance annexing 5899 Walnut to the village.
Thank you. That brings us to item 12, council member reports and new business. Commissioner Barnett, do you want to lead us off?
Wasn't that list 18 items for 2012? I think, staff, right? Good.
I lost count.
Yeah.
Commissioner Durkin.
Just want to wish everyone a happy, safe Halloween, because we won't be meeting until after the festivities that will be taking place that my colleagues will be reporting out on. So be safe and be happy.
Thank you. Commissioner Schnell.
The long-awaited October 22nd is fast approaching, and there's two events that I'm sure Commissioner Neustadt will probably talk about the window painting, so I won't talk about that. But HGNA is holding their annual pancake breakfast, October 22nd from 8 to 11 at Ballydoyle's, and it's a great breakfast and a great organization, and I would encourage everybody to go in and have a warm breakfast before you go out in the cold and start painting windows.
It's going to be 58 on Saturday.
Or it could be warm and sunny and you just want a nice warm breakfast, just continue to stay warm. So anyway, please go and have some pancakes and enjoy.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a personal note. There actually is somebody you can put up with me. She's done so for 37 years. Happy anniversary, Mrs. Waldeck.
Happy anniversary. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rankin.
No report.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. As Commissioner Schnell said, there are a lot of activities celebrating the Halloween holiday. Friday, October 21st is Moonlight Madness downtown with spooktacular savings. Saturday, October 22nd, after and or during your breakfast at the Ballydoyle HGNA Pancake Breakfast is the window painting sponsored by the Downers Grove Rotary Club and Downtown Management. They ask you to bring your own brush, and look at this, a canned good for a donation to Fish. So there we go right there with some helping out of our community. Sunday, October 23rd at 1 p.m., a Halloween costume parade. You can meet at the parking lot west of Main Street train station in costume at 12:30, and the parade kicks off around 1 and proceeds down Main Street to Fischel Park. There's safe trick-or-treating after the parade from 1:30 to 4 at the Downtown Merchants. Saturday, October 29th, Baird & Warner presents their 19th annual costume contest and free movie at the Tivoli. And that's it on that page, but on our village website at downers.us, you can click on the front page for trick-or-treating and Halloween safety tips that are right there on the front page for the recommended hours of trick-or-treating on Monday, October 31st, and a few other safety tips for all of us as we celebrate Halloween. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a couple things. One, Bill, not only can I put up with you, but I enjoy working with you. I just don't like to be scolded, so I hope I wasn't too strident in my comments. Getting back to Commissioner Barnett's question, though, about a follow-up meeting with respect to DuPage mayors and managers, I want to come back to that because if we're going to have one, I'd like to understand to the extent that expectations were not met in terms of what the forum was going to be like, I want to make sure that we actually do that. And what is the maybe, I don't know if you want to comment on what it is you would like to do or when we're going to have it. Being very transparent, Mr. Locran, we're going to talk about it right in front of you.
Well, the brief description of a couple of months' worth of activities, at least for my part, doesn't come anywhere close to addressing the concerns that led up to our choosing not to participate. There were some very specific actions. There were some obligations they bound us to without our consent. There were issues of how they ran things in Springfield. There were a list of things, and so a couple of kind of cursory comments about how we happen to be involved and paying attention now. They've always done that stuff, and so I would like to hear more. I take them at their word that they've chosen sort of a different course by trying to get some, they use some good words, some mentorship and I think direction from the lobbyist. I know, Mayor, that you're committed to trying to really participate and help guide change, and that's good, but I'd like to talk more with them in a dialogue, in a table that includes all of us.
Great, I mean, that's what I want to understand, because I want to make sure that we get from them what you're looking for, because I don't want to have another gathering and then you're not, you may not be the answers you want, but at least you're getting the topics addressed, because that's important. Because that is obviously an element of it. That goes to the piece of what I think is, have they changed? Again, it's sort of like, we dated for a long time, then we broke up, and now, have they changed, have we changed, and has the world changed? And I think there's a little bit of all of that. I think we found out what it was like to be off on our own, and that was good, but I think we also found out what we were missing. I think there have been some changes within that organization, but I think the third thing is, yes, this time we're making a commitment, they are and we are, that we're not just going to rejoin, we're going to, as I said, rejoin with a vengeance and try to drive change from within. If that ultimately proves to be unsuccessful, we can always see someone else. But I want to make sure that those questions about what they've done to change are addressed to your satisfaction.
They are, but some of it too, Mayor, is I'd like to hear some more reaction from them about some of the comments along those lines, because, we intend to participate, hoping for a different organization a year from now than what we saw 2 years ago.
Correct.
And I've heard you say that, and I think most of us would probably agree with that. I haven't heard them react to that, and we're but one small, not maybe so small, but one potential piece of a decision-making team. And I, frankly heard some stuff tonight that sounded very, very tired and very similar to what some of the approaches that I didn't like before. So,
Mayor, can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
I think that part of my hesitancy tonight is that it seems like some of the things you talked about just now in your mayors and managers conference, Metro Mayors Conference,
Metropolitan Mayors Caucus.
That one. It seems like the consolidation, the things, the innovation things that they're talking about at that level, we've already done here without the help of DuPage mayors and managers. I think some of the questions that I may have for them is how are they going to specifically address those issues and use our innovative methods to improve their own organization and then the rest of the organizations in DuPage County. So I do agree with Commissioner Barnett that some sort of, I don't know if we can get everybody together in the next 2 weeks, but some sort of communication with that organization's leaders and leadership would be beneficial to me at least also.
Yeah, and I agree 100% that that's a piece of it. I think I just want to keep pointing out that there are other pieces of it. One is we've learned what not being there has had in terms of an impact upon us. And yes, we've been able to achieve successes by ourselves, but I know both from the elected official level and also from the staff level for a fact that we've been missing some things. And it's not something you can say, oh, I put in a quarter and I got $1 back, but because I'm not being included in the conversations and in the meetings and in the networking and the exchange of ideas and whatnot, sure, we may come up with something on our own, but we're also missing out on a source of collaboration, communication, cooperation that I think right now we're kind of experiencing it as a, here's why you should participate. So it's not so much that they can say that, they've kind of been showing it by allowing us to kind of participate on that basis. But that's not been the case for 2 years, and I don't think that's going to continue free of charge forever. And then I think there's also just an increased need for that kind of collaboration with your peers. It's no different than what we've been talking about doing with our neighbors and with other taxing bodies in town. And if, you just have to work together. But yes, on one of the legs of the stool, if you will, would be how have they changed, how have they improved, and part of that is that I think we're going to try to help them improve by not just participating, but asking for a turn at the wheel. Now, can I tell you where that's going to go? No, I can't because we're not there yet. Don't have the wheel yet, so I don't know.
You want to be president of that?
No, I don't know about that.
Question to ask yourself.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
None of us can do it.
Baby steps. Baby
Mayors
steps.
and managers.
Baby steps.
You only
Baby
got 3
steps.
years on your term.
But anyway, that's why I wanted to come back.
The rest of us, so I don't know.
That's why I wanted to come back to this conversation, because I want to make sure that that what it was you were looking for, that we were able to provide that, or they were able to provide that. And then I know Commissioner Newstead probably had some of the same questions. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you.
That's why I new business, right?
That's why I appreciate workshops. And luckily, we have 2 weeks to determine. I mean, I'm all in favor. I've indicated that, I'll be ready to go with this in 2 weeks. If there are meetings, I'd like to be invited to the meetings as well. It's a data gathering time, and that's fine. So hopefully it'll be on the agenda in 2 weeks, and everybody will have their questions answered to their satisfaction. And Mayor, I just, and I don't want to go back to what I was talking about previously, but when you were talking about mayors and managers, you said twice tonight, go back with a vengeance. I would hope you would pick a different word.
Yes, fair point.
Thank you.
Fair point.
We don't want to be vengeful with them.
Fair point, you're right. Poor choice of words on my part. Commissioner Durkin.
Be aggressive. The building note, that's outstanding. For DuPage Mayors and Man, we're still paying that on a yearly basis, correct?
Yes,
So that hasn't been, we didn't get rid of that. We continued on with that. So we didn't do a mass payout.
Deal.
that's correct.
Okay, so we're still there. If this council decides not to vote on this, joining this membership in November, and we join in December, will the 18,000 be reduced to a lower rate, or would it just be extended past April?
We would have to ask the leadership of DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference.
Okay.
Well, that's all I had, other than to just point out that the Halloween parade is done by our own Downers Grove Newton Lions Club every year. So that's a wonderful tradition in town, and happy Halloween to everyone. Happy, safe Halloween. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Thank you. Good night.
Is this something of yours?